West Denver. Sleep deprived and heavily caffeinated.
All right, let's do this then.
This is the Jeff and Bill Show.
I don't understand why this is an issue.
They don't always agree, but hey, at least they have coffee.
Coffee.
And each other.
I love you, man.
God help us.
I want to bless him. We need all the help we can get.
Now here's Jeff Hunt and Bill Thorpe. The Jeff and Bill Show on News Talk 710 KNUS.
It is 6 a.m. in the Mile High City on this Wednesday, April 23rd, 2025. Good morning, Denver, Colorado. You've tuned in to the Jeff and Bill Show, News Talk 710 KNUS. I'm your co-host, Jeff Hunt, along with Bill Thorpe, bringing you the freshest insights and hottest takes from the right, left, and center. We got an absolutely fire show for you today. We're going to dive into the Supreme Court case that was heard yesterday. Has to do with schools, your kids, compelled reading, all of that at stake. Mahmoud v. Taylor. We'll get into that case in a second. Charles Gray, the Secretary of State for Wyoming, is going to join us. They're putting in some new voting requirements up there in the state. He's going to give us some insight to what they're doing. And then I've got to work on the pronunciation of it. Deep Singh Badhisha is, I believe, how you pronounce it. He's a progressive political strategist. We usually have a Democrat hanging out with us today, Bill. Normally they run away.
Yeah, that's going to be kind of fun.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about how Democrat Party's shifting, kind of the future of the Democrat Party. From my take, it's all Bernie, all AOC, all the time. Sorry, John Hickenlooper, Michael Bennett. You're just not progressive enough. He'll be joining us at the 8 o'clock hour for what will be a very interesting discussion live in studio here. John Zaller's joining us about a new Titanic exhibit that's coming to Colorado. You're not going to want to miss. And then Pam Bondi launching a committee yesterday on anti-Christian bias. What is she finding and what are they hoping to achieve? Get into all of that. But now it's time for Blake Olson.
Blake Olson.
Blake Olson, news and comment.
Good morning, Hump Day. Wednesday, it's 42, clear in Denver, expecting a high of 68 today. The 7-10 5-day forecast is coming up. Our top story, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent expects a de-escalation in the tariff fight with China. What? No way. I thought the world was coming to an end a few weeks ago. So stocks closed out Tuesday's trading session in positive territory. We may see them go up and down today, of course. Kevin Hassett, director of the National Economic Council, with Stegall this morning, right here on Salem and KNUS, says that trade with India should encourage people.
And I think that if you're looking for something to really feel buoyant about, to celebrate, think about it this way. It's probably the case that historically, the country that had the least beneficial trade policy towards the U.S. on earth was India. They had trade barriers. You can't buy this, you can't buy that. They had 85% tariffs on motorcycles, on Harley Davidsons. I mean, they were wrong in almost every direction. And to think about it, that they're the first ones coming to the table, that's a sign of the power of President Trump's strategy.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff declined to attend a meeting in London with Ukrainian officials. The talks are aimed at reaching a ceasefire deal between Ukraine and Russia. Right now, it doesn't look good. A federal judge has granted a temporary restraining order that prohibits the deportation of illegals from Colorado under the Alien Enemies Act. U.S. District Judge Charlotte Sweeney ruled that individuals subject to the AEA removal must receive at least 3 weeks' notice. It'll expire on May 6th, but it could be extended. DJT says illegal immigrants should be deported without trials. 47 says countries like Venezuela and the Congo have emptied their prisons into the United States, and giving these illegal individuals trials would slow down the deportation process, of course. Congresswoman Lauren Boebert wants the federal government to stop funding a Colorado public transportation project. She's calling for an end to any funding for the project, which could provide passenger rail service from Pueblo to Fort Collins. She suggested spending more money on road construction, saying that those projects are more cost-effective and adaptable. And she recently sent a letter to DOJ saying the project is wasteful and a threat to property rights.
Wasteful? Has she not seen what California has been able to achieve with their high-speed train?
That's right.
I mean, they've only spent billions of dollars and built like a bridge.
So many people use it and will use it. Yeah, that's the thing about trains, man. I mean, they look great, and everybody thinks, they save, the environment and all that. And the problem is they go north and south or east and west,
Well, even in the East Coast corridor, where people actually used the train to get between New York and Washington, D.C. and Philadelphia and all that stuff, it's still heavily subsidized by the federal government. It can't turn a profit.
Exactly.
No, so you think
right.
Fort Collins to, Colorado Springs
Pueblo?
is somehow going to Pueblo is going to be a big old moneymaker? Come on.
No, of course not. And she's exactly right. Let's hit the roads. I hit like 13 potholes on Santa Fe yesterday. I mean, in Alameda or wherever I was. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Potholes and squeegee cleaners.
Yes, absolutely.
Great experience.
And you're dodging people coming out of who knows where with signs in their hands. It's a beautiful thing. Crocky Sports, which owns Ball Arena, is making plans to redevelop the area around the venue. Speaking of the city and improvements, they submitted its concept for the plan in its first phase of development earlier this week. The project would include a 13-story hotel, 2 residential buildings, and a 5,000-seat performance venue. The Denver City Council approved the rezoning for the area around the project site earlier this month. One of the most massive wildfires in the history of Ocean County, New Jersey, has burned more than 8,500 acres and forced thousands to evacuate. The flames are threatening more than 1,300 structures and have caused scores of power outages. Public viewing for the late Pope Francis starts today at St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican. The 47 administration is collecting private medical records from both federal and commercial databases for HHS Secretary RFK Jr.'s new autism study. The director of the NIH confirmed the move this week, saying the new data will allow Kennedy's researchers to study comprehensive patient data with broad coverage of the U.S. population for the first time. News brought to you by Lair Fireplace and Patio, Denver's premier source for everything fireplace, patio, and grills, locally owned and operated since 1954, online at lairfireplacepatio.com. Rocks lose 4-3 to the Royals. Game 3, Avalanche Stars tonight, 7:30 in Lodo. I know Kelly Michaels getting ready for that one. Nuggets Game 3 with the Clippers tomorrow night. 40 in Thornton, 39 in Lakewood, 42 in Denver. Jeff and Billy continue. It's Blake Olson. That was good. Blake Olson, News Talk 710 KNUS.
Some developing upslope will bring some changing weather to the Front Range in the days ahead. Temperatures will be slightly cooler, and chances of showers and thunderstorms will be going up. Highs today, mid to upper 60s, with scattered showers and thunderstorms this afternoon and tonight. Lows 40s. Highs will be 60s Thursday and near 60 Friday, with scattered afternoon showers and thunderstorms possible both days. Weather sponsored by Colorado's Best Roofing, reminding you to protect your home from the harsh Colorado weather and schedule your free, no-obligation roof inspection today at roofingcolorado.com. That's roofingcolorado.com. Meteorologist Don Day in the 710 KNUS Weather Center.
All right, Fox News covering the Supreme Court arguments that took place yesterday. Supreme Court appearing to side with parents in religious liberty dispute over storybooks. The Supreme Court's conservative majority offered strong support for parents seeking the religious liberty right to be informed about and opt their children out of reading material in elementary schools that they say conflicts with their faith. The Montgomery County, Maryland School Board withdrew its original opt-out policy for books related to gender and sexuality, prompting a federal lawsuit. In a marathon 2.5-hour oral argument, the justices debated whether parents had been unfairly burdened in exercising their constitutional rights. It is one of 3 high-profile religious-themed cases. The High Court will decide this term, including disputes over tax exemptions for religious groups and taxpayer funding for private religious charter schools, which will be argued next week. Justice Sonia Sotomayor and her liberal colleagues appeared to back the county's position on the storybooks. She noted a lower appeals court had refused a preliminary injunction to temporarily reinstate the opt-out policy. They never reached the issue on whether or not there was disruption and what the motive was for taking away the opt-out. What they decided was that there wasn't coercion here, that there was mere exposure. I understood from the record that all that was required is that the books be put on the bookshelf. If that's all that's required, is that coercion? But Justice Samuel Alito echoed the view of several of his conservative colleagues about returning to a previous policy that he said most schools around the country permit. What's the big deal about allowing them to opt out of this? He asked. Alito also questioned the content of several of the books raised in the appeal dealing with same-sex marriage. I don't think anybody can read that and say, well, this is just telling children that there are occasions where men marry other men, said Alito. It was a clear moral message. And it may be a good message. It just sends a message that a lot of religious people disagree with. Hundreds on both sides of the issues rallied outside the court, some carrying signs saying, let parents be parents, and others include all families. The suburban Washington County introduced new books with LGBTQ plus characters and themes into the elementary school curriculum in 2022 as part of the district's inclusivity initiative. One of the challenged storybooks raised in the appeals is Prince and Knight, described as a modern fairy tale for ages 4 to 8 of the 2 males falling in love after working together to battle a dragon threatening their kingdom and later marrying. Another book mentioned repeatedly in the court's public session was Uncle Bobby's Wedding, about a little girl's reaction to her favorite relative's plan to marry a man. The school district refused to allow parents to opt out of their kids' classroom instructions. They, in the past, would have allowed kids to opt out of comprehensive sex education, but because these books were put into an English class, the families were not allowed to opt out. While the school board initially allowed parents to keep their children out of this curriculum, the plaintiffs say officials quickly reversed course, announcing in March 2023 that exceptions would not be granted, and that parents would not be notified before the books were introduced in their children's classroom. Officials cited increased absenteeism as one of the reasons for the change. We felt as parents that we would present these things to our children like we always have when they're ready to receive them. And especially a child with special needs, it's even more difficult for her to understand. Grace Morrison, one of the plaintiffs. She and her husband, both Catholics, now homeschool their children after the school refused the accommodation. And it wasn't just Christians. In fact, Muslims joined in with the lawsuit yesterday on this. Vox reporting that this was terrible, that parents wanted to opt their kids out. The implications of this argument are breathtaking, Vox says. As Justice Sonia Sotomayor pointed out, Past cases involve parents who object to lessons touching on topics like divorce, interfaith couples, and immodest dress. Parents have brought federal lawsuits objecting on religious grounds to the government using unique numbers to identify people in its own internal records. They've objected to lessons exposing children to ideas about evolution, pacifism, magic, and women achieving things outside of the home, and false views of death, among other things. Now, yesterday, I listened to, I believe it was Kavanaugh, brought up this point, that they're not asking the school to remove this content. They're just asking the school to accommodate parents who may, for that particular lesson being taught, may not want their kids to be involved in it. For me, my perspective, this is pretty easy. And I think most of the U.S. Supreme Court justices saw this. It's just an accommodation issue. Like I mentioned, they're not asking this content to be removed from curriculum. They're not asking these books to be pulled out. They're just saying, hey, allow parents notification if you're going to be teaching about some controversial issues. It's not that hard to accommodate this. But this goes to an even further issue. I read in Vox where they get frustrated with the idea that you would even have to notify parents with regards to anything that you're teaching. And if you remember, Republicans have been running legislation here in the state of Colorado to just say, can we make all curriculum available to the parents? Just put it online so they can see what's being taught. This is a partnership. Education is a partnership between schools and parents. Why not just put it all online? If parents have concerns, and that's popped up in our school before, we just meet with the teachers to talk about it. What's being taught? How are you approaching the subject? That type of thing. It's a partnership. So to me, providing the opportunity for parents to opt out if they find something violates what they want to particularly teach young children, that's not a big deal to me. I don't get it. Bill, your thoughts?
Well, and I just want to touch that law for a second. All curriculum is available to all parents. There are review times and segments, and those are announced by the school districts, and so that's available.
Yeah, you have to go in to see it.
Yeah. So what? Don't care. Don't care. I think it's stupid to put it online. Just personally, I think it's dumb. Right. And the reason being is because the idea of you can't make the effort. It's important enough for you to being concerned about what your kids are being taught, and you're going to research it. But the one thing you can't do is go to the location.
Yeah, but it's not 1985. Everything else we do is online. Why can't you put the curriculum online?
But we want to do things like, this is the idea is where we want to put the hurdles and where we don't. So the idea being that I don't think it's an undue burden necessarily for them to have to show up and see the curriculum. I think it's necessarily a burden sometimes for the school districts to place it online. It's extra stuff, time and money and effort that they'd have to spend away from actually educating the kids. And we talk about we're going to have a gentleman on here next hour from Wyoming talking about providing proof of citizenship in order to make sure you vote. It's difficult. Those are extra steps you have to take. But we're okay with that one, but not the other one. It's just weird. I just find it interesting where, how, and why we put these barriers. But let's put that to the side for a little bit. What I can't figure out is the necessary harm. I listened to a little bit of the arguments, not in their entirety, but bits and pieces of it. And there were a lot of things talking about harm and burden, but I never saw a lot of things demonstrating either the harm nor the burden of these books being inside the classroom. And I understand the notification process, and I think that might be the best way. But in these situations, how do you work? There's some difficult workarounds. There's some difficult issues because it's not a specific class. It would be any time these subjects or anything come up. And one of the things might be that if someone that sits next to your student has that book and takes that book that you disagree with and is reading it and turns and talks to your student about it, should you have been notified beforehand the conversation was going to take place? Because that is now exposure. They're now being exposed to this conversation.
That's the issue. I think they're dealing with the idea that this is being taught in curriculum. Like this was pointed out with Kavanaugh. They're not trying to remove the books. They're not trying to take this out of the curriculum. They're just asking to be notified.
I know, but how and when are you looking as far as being notified about the curriculum? How do we know when some of these things and or topics are going to come up? And what I'm talking about here is that child that is sitting next to your child that has taken that book off the classroom bookshelf or off the library shelf now may turn and talk to your child about it. Your child may look over and see the pictures on the page. Your child may read some of the words on the page. Does that qualify as the exposure?
I don't think
Should you
so.
have been notified for that one? Okay, then what's the difference between having them read it inside a class or having that exposure of the child next to them and talking to them about it?
One is official part of the classroom instruction experience.
Yeah.
So you can't see the difference between a teacher teaching and a kid talking about it?
No, what I see the difference, but what I'm asking about is where's the harm and the burden? I don't see a harm or a burden in either situation. So if it is a harm to the child, to their beliefs, or a burden to the parents based on their religious belief system, it should be in both cases, not only in the one based on who's delivering the message. The harm and burden should be consistent inside of the school, not conditional based on who the person is giving the information. It should be consistent. And that's where I see inconsistency. Now, I think the Supreme Court's going to rule in favor, in favor of the case. So I think the plaintiffs are going to win. But I think they're going to be wrong because I don't think that the plaintiffs have demonstrated harm nor the burden that has been placed on their faith by this. That's the thing. I never heard anybody make those arguments.
Do you think parents should be able to opt out of their kids during the comprehensive sex education conversations?
The thing is, I don't really, but it's not a fight that I'm willing to have because I understand where and why some people hold some of those beliefs. Okay, fine. But that is a siloed class that is coming up. Some of these things may or may not be necessarily siloed, and that would be the idea. And is that what we're doing? We're saying, okay, well, this is only the special time where we can talk about these certain people and these relationships, and we can't discuss them or have them involved in any other conversations at any other point in time throughout the entirety of the school year. And that would be a little bit more concerning and problematic based on the fact that these are about relationships at times.
Phone lines are starting to light up. 303-696-1971. 303-696-1971 if you want to join the conversation. Text line is 720-819-5115. 720-819-5115. Look, the United States of America has made it history to accommodate people that have different religious beliefs. Because accommodation, in this case, just simply notifying parents when you're going to be discussing a book that is being debated in the public square right now, the values are being debated in the public square, that type of thing, simply notifying them. That's it. Again, we're not pulling the books out. We're not saying that the kids can't talk about it themselves. We're just saying if you're a teacher and you're involved in an education process, which should be a partnership with parents to begin with, then just simply notify the parents about it. If the parents go, you know what, we don't agree with this, we're not sure we want our kids spending a day learning about how, Johnny's uncles are getting married because they're 5-year-olds and why we need to spend a day thinking about that. Parents, I think, have the right to go, we're going to go spend our day doing something else. The other thing you get in this sense is that, especially in the Vox article on this, is that liberals really believe that if you drop your kid off at school, they get all the control. It's their world, and it's their agenda, and it's their worldview that they're going to talk about. And if you're a parent that raises concerns, maybe doesn't agree with it, well, you're the bad person for not abiding by that agenda. Very clear to me in that Vox article. Give us a call, 303-696-1971, or text us on the Dan Caplis Law text line at 720-819-5115. Look, are you ready to transform your kitchen or bathroom into a stunning masterpiece? Look no further than The Art of Granite for your premier destination for exquisite granite, marble, and quartz countertops. For over 15 years, Mitch Floria, owner of The Art of Granite, has been crafting and installing custom countertops, fireplaces, showers, and more. Their team of experts will guide you through the selection process, ensuring you find the perfect stone to match your style and budget. Visit their showroom in Golden or browse their online inventory at theartofgranite.com. Discover the endless possibilities for your home renovation project. Mention KNUS and get a free bathroom countertop with new kitchen countertops, or choose a free kitchen or bathroom sink with any countertop package. Don't wait. Transform your home into the oasis you deserve. Schedule your free consultation with Mitch today. Go to theartofgranite.com. That's theartofgranite.com. Mention KNUS for those exclusive savings. Transform your kitchen or bathroom dreams into reality with theartofgranite.com. We'll continue with your phone calls and texts. You're listening to The Jeff and Bill Show.
This is Denver's talk leader, News Talk 710 KNUS.
Welcome back to the Jeff and Bill Show. We're discussing the merits of a U.S. Supreme Court case that was argued yesterday. Supreme Court appearing to side with parents of religious liberty dispute over storybooks. So here's essentially what happened. In Maryland, in this particular county, Montgomery County, if you were taught comprehensive sex education, parents were notified that this was going to be taught in the classroom, and you had the opportunity to opt out of it. Just go to something else with your day, right? If you don't believe what the state teaches on this, you're not mandated to put your kid in there. Well, then a series of 21 books or so were introduced to elementary school kids, and they included stories about gay couples and people getting married and stuff like that. Opt out, not required. It's not comprehensive sex education. The parents saying, well, we would like to be notified about this. This is elementary school kids. This is stuff that, morals and values that we don't necessarily agree with, whether you're Christian or Muslim, being taught to our kids. And we'd like to at least be notified of it. The teacher's going to read this particular book in class that day or something like that. And America's had a history of religious accommodation, even if it is tough on the state. For instance, if you want to, in a draft, opt out because of your conscientious objector, well, the state has to abide by it, even if you're in the middle of a war. And isn't it frustrating for the state? I'm sure it is in some capacities. But we're a country built upon religious freedom. So the burden is upon the state to accommodate those that have different religious values. Always has been. And so most of the Supreme Court justices going, guys, they're not asking you to take the books out. They're not asking you to adjust the curriculum. They're not banning this type of stuff from taking place. So why not just notify them? Why can't you just notify them? And majority of the Supreme Court justices seeming to take that side. On the other side, Justice Sonia Sotomayor, Elena Kagan, and others going, well, there's plenty of things that kids get exposed to that is controversial. Are we going to have to sit here and provide constant notification on everything from conversations that may happen around divorce or interracial couples or those types of things? How far does it have to go? But in this case, the Supreme Court justice is going on these particular issues, which are hotly debated in our culture. At least notifying parents is not that bad. I think all curriculum should be available for parents to see. And we live in a digital culture. Pretty much everything we do is online. I guarantee you that the teachers that were reviewing the curriculum before they purchased it reviewed it online. So why not just make all curriculum available to all parents? This is a partnership between parents and the school district with regards to the education of their kids. If there's debate over that curriculum, allow parents to have those conversations with teachers and do that. So, to me, this doesn't seem that burdensome. I think it should be a 9-0 decision. Bill, your thoughts?
Again, I will reinforce all curriculum is available to all parents, and all parents do have a comment period in which they can talk about whether or not they like these books or these choices or these curriculum. It's there. It exists. And so that already is a feature of the system. So that I understand that what's your desire, but it exists. That's there. The thing for me is that inside of this, the idea of having to request a permission form on a large number of these subjects, for me, I think provides a chilling effect. It says to the school that we are going to create a problematic system in order to make it more difficult for you to use these books, so the default would be not to use these books. And I think it's different than a sex ed class because the class is siloed. It's something that is coming up. It's a segment of what is going to be taught. However, some of the idea of same-sex relationships may come up in a variety of different ideas, different discussions inside of a classroom that may or may not be anticipated. I understand the idea of sending someone a note if this is the book that we are going to discuss today, but this is one where I think that the plaintiff's lawyers had a problem with this. Where is that line drawn? If you had someone that comes from a fundamentalist Muslim belief, there are some that believe that that women shouldn't be seen, heard, or even have any sort of employment outside of the workforce. So should the teacher have to take that into account and send home a permission slip at any point in time in which anything is discussed in which a female may be working or having anything productive to do outside of the home? Is that a problem? If the female is the lead character inside of a story, is that a problem? Where is that line? And that's where I have a problem with the plaintiffs, is they couldn't tell me where that line was. It only was based on what I feel. And I'm not okay with your feelings being enough of a burden for the school district to have to change these policies. I don't believe that how you feel about this is necessarily enough of an issue. There has to be, for me, some sort of harm, some sort of impact. And I'm not seeing any of this demonstrated by the parents. And part of it, what comes back to it, is something that my dad told me when I was little. And he said, if someone can hand you a book, if someone can talk to you in a manner in which it shakes your beliefs, that's on you, not them. Your beliefs aren't strong enough. That means you have questions. That means you haven't come to a conclusion. Then you need to spend more time examining it. That is not about the book or the language or the lecture that has been placed in front of you.
Do you think that's fair, though, to put that
do.
upon 5- and 6-year-olds?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, because the idea being that if a 5 or a 6-year-old can read a book about Jimmy having 2 mommies and that shakes their faith and foundation, I question the parents. How well have you established that faith and foundation?
Because they're not talking about sexuality to 5- and 6-year-olds.
But they didn't talk about why mommy and daddy got married ever? That wasn't a discussion? Why we've done?
No,
They've never gone. They've never
5
gone
and
to
6.
Yeah, at 5 and 6, you haven't talked about when mom and dad ever fell in love. We have Valentine's Day. You said mom and dad celebrate an anniversary. The child, I'm assuming before 5 and 6, may have asked, "Where did I come from?" God blessed us with his soul, and when mom and dad came together, yeah. And the 5 and 6-year-old.
In your context, you're dealing with multiple worldviews on human sexuality that a 5 or 6-year-old is supposed to be able to weigh and then maintain what their parents would like them to maintain with regards to values.
Well, here's the thing: is
5 and 6.
The school isn't asking them to agree with it. And they're not punishing them for that. They're exposing them to it. That's it. And I'm sorry, but if exposure to a thought is going to shake your faith sucks. Absolutely.
For a 5 or 6-year-old.
Yes. 110%. Yes. If showing a 5-year-old that there are same-sex couples shakes their foundational belief.
So why not show them pornography?
In their religion? That's different based on sexual activity. I'm just talking about the idea that a same-sex couple exists. We can't turn around and say, la, 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 they don't exist. Yeah, and that was my issue with the plaintiff.
So why is your line better than the parents' line?
I'm not necessarily saying it's better, but what I'm asking the parents is to show me harm. And where I'm showing my thing, the idea is 5 and 6-year-olds being exposed to something that we would consider pornography is graphic sexual material that's not necessarily good for the child. And I think we can all agree that I'm not arguing for that, but I'm arguing about the issue of exposure to the fact that someone can have 2 mommies or 2 daddies, something like that. Or that a female can have a job outside of the home, or maybe could even get divorced. All of those things would go against someone's religion. And what I'm looking for from the parents is the harm. Those kids aren't being asked to agree with it and saying the best thing is if you have 2 daddies. That's not on a test. That's not going to be asked of the child. It's just exposure to this is what happens. Just like people that may be fundamentalist Christians may think that the earth is only several thousand years old. But then when they're exposed to things about books about dinosaurs, are they going to object to that? Do we have to send them notes now if dinosaurs are going to be discussed in class at the age of 5 and 6? 5 and 6-year-olds love dinosaurs, but it doesn't shake their faith necessarily. I know a lot of kids that are really strong Christians, and they love dinosaurs as well. And so those two things can't exist. What I'm looking for and what I don't think the plaintiffs were able to demonstrate, however, I don't think it matters a lick to the conservative Supreme Court justices. I don't think it matters at all. It matters harm. They weren't able to demonstrate
the
harm.
assumption in your line of reasoning, I think, is that this is just neutral information being taught to kids as opposed to worldview promotion.
Why do you assume it's worldview promotion?
Because of the books themselves, the way they're written. I mean, this isn't a biology textbook. This is celebrating a marriage between two men, for instance, the uncles getting married.
Yeah.
So
this isn't. You celebrate a marriage?
This isn't just a neutral worldview. And I don't see kids reading lots of other stories about boys and girls getting married and all that type of stuff.
Kids read a whole lot of books about Harry Potter. I don't see a bunch of wizards running around. But that was the argument back then. Is it exposing my kids?
You had parents that disagreed with that.
Yeah, they totally did. Did their kids turn into wizards? Nope, not at all. Nope. You don't have a whole bunch of wizards running around.
I don't think that was the concern with Harry Potter, that they were going to turn into wizards.
Well, the issue was that it was magic and it was to shake their face. Yeah, I know.
All that
Where
other
are the witches?
stuff.
Do we have any witches?
Right.
Do we have a large coven of witches running around right now?
Some.
No.
I've met some.
I know. But
they all come on to comment on my stuff.
I doubt they were influenced by Harry Potter. I doubt they went around looking for platform 9 3/4.
But is that your,
so that's the issue.
That your place to judge? I mean, don't the
parents?
It theirs? Yeah, the parents.
No.
That's their primary role and responsibility is raising their kids. And we make decisions every single day as to the type of content they're exposed to. It's like a diet of the mind. And we don't let them eat junk food. We don't let them watch stuff that we feel is going to harm them. And we want to help shape their worldview so that they flourish as human beings.
So telling them
I think it's the parents' opportunity to be able to, parents' responsibility to be able to do that. And if they're not asking this stuff to be removed from the schools. They're just asking to be notified about it.
Where's the harm? What's the harm inside of this? The idea that your child learns that there are same-sex couples, that's a harm. So the idea is they need to walk around with blinders the entire time and not understand that those people exist?
Exposure of it. I think it's a promotional exposure of it. And there are religious parents out there, whether you're Christian, Muslim, or Jewish, who believe that same-sex activity is harmful.
And there's some parents out there that believe women should not work. Do we pull those books too and don't have any conversations? That if a child that is in that classroom raises their hand and said, "Can I be president?" and she's a female, the teacher has to say, "I can't talk about that. You have no choices." Right? Where's the harm? That's what I'm looking at is where's the harm in the exposure to this? They're not asking the child to agree with it. They're not asking the child to promote it. They're not asking the child anything else about it other than the exposure to this exists.
Again, I don't think it's a neutral exposure of this. And secondly, I don't think you have or have seen a large number of parents that want notifications regarding women working. So I think it's an extrapolation and a slippery slope argument. But that if we go down this, all of a sudden, one of the arguments yesterday from Maryland was, well, we have lots of parents that are now all of a sudden opting out of these classes and demanding notification on this. Well, maybe you shouldn't be teaching it in the first place if you're getting a lot of parents frustrated about this type of curriculum. But I just don't. I think it's an extrapolation to the extreme.
Well, I disagree with that being an extrapolation because I'm dealing on the idea of a pair of parents, that dyad. And you said the parents all the time make choices. So I'm talking about that individual parent. So those individual parents can believe that women should not work outside of the home.
Yes.
That could be their belief. It's not about the large number of kids at the school and their belief system. It's not. We're not taking a poll. No, we're not taking a poll. This is individual. This is about individual choice. That's what the argument was about, the individual choice of the parents. It's not about the overwhelming number of parents. They didn't ask the school to take a poll and ask who agrees or disagrees with this. That's not the issue. That was never part of the discussion. The issue being this is an individual choice made by the parents, and the parents individually should be allowed to make this choice. That's where the argument is. And where I think it fails is I don't see the harm or the negative consequences about exposing them to things that exist. That's it. That's the idea is I think that you do. I think it's more of a harm to try to insulate your child and say that gay people don't exist. They don't exist.
So if a conservative school district decides they want to teach the 10 Commandments, no opt-out for the parents.
How are they teaching it and where?
Because what's the harm?
For what?
Well, they're just talking about it. Or they're actually, in this case, they're putting together books when talking about how great the Ten Commandments are.
Where and when? Again, I would like to see
school.
Okay, and what's the context? What's the context?
They're putting together books talking about how great it is for people to follow the Ten Commandments.
Okay, but how people? What if it's just a conversation about this person followed the Ten Commandments and finds joy and happiness in that religion? Okay, fine. Yeah, if that is Johnny's experience inside of the book and he's the protagonist, okay, fine. That's fine. That's okay.
But
Perfectly
no
fine with
opt-outs?
that.
You don't even want the school to notify the parents, hey, we're going to be talking about this one guy who found great fulfillment in following the Ten Commandments.
No, I don't see any opt-out on that, because if the idea is then maybe you've got someone that goes into Buddhism. Maybe someone else finds joy as far as the Muslim. Again, I'm looking at the harm. I don't necessarily see the harm of the idea that this person, and again, if it was taught of the idea of, hey, we're going to explore religion, if you're talking about it in the context of world religions, but you're only discussing one, then I've got an issue. If you're talking in the parameters of English and literature, okay, but what other ones are we discussing? Again, it's about context. And I believe that in these classrooms, you are having both heterosexual and homosexual relationships that are subject inside of the books. Seems to be diverse enough. I'm okay with that. I'm okay. And I don't necessarily see the harm. And if someone is a Muslim and they read the book about the Christian finding joy in the Ten Commandments and it shakes their faith, that for me is on the Muslim faith. It's not on the Christian, not on the exposure. That's on you individually. And that's on your faith being shaken based on that. That's not that. I don't think you can avoid.
Bill, you want to educate your kids that way? I don't think it's right for us to judge other parents that want to educate their kids and simply want to be notified. We got to get to You Choose the News. All right. Feel free to join the conversation. We can continue this 303-696-1971 or text us on the Dan Caplis Law text line at 720-819-5115. You're listening to The Jeff and Bill Show.
This is Denver's Talk Leader, News Talk 710 KNUS.
Blake Olson, news and comment.
Welcome back to the Jeff and Bill Show. We're going to pivot here from our feisty debate on the Supreme Court. Arguments yesterday regarding parental notification and controversial subjects in schools, all that stuff for some You Choose the News.
Yes, it's that time of the morning where we get to make questionable decisions. It's something we call America's favorite fake radio news game show. It's You Choose the News. I've spent mere moments this morning scouring the interwebs for really dumb stories. I got them in my hand here. About us humans, I gave them more even ridiculous headlines so we can play this fake radio news game show. Why, oh why would it be this irresponsible with valuable 710 KNUS airtime? Well, because people in charge aren't awake yet. Yes, this is what happens when we are left unsupervised. Chaos ensues. Oh, but it's a lot of fun. Alrighty. Now, Blake Olson is joining us from the newsroom. Jeff Hunt is in the studio. Gentlemen, here are your stories this morning. Headline number 1. Fool and money head in different directions. Headline number 2. Small grab equals big loss. Headline number 3. Sticking to the pirate's code. And headline number 4. Give me fuel, give me fire, give me that which I desire. Mr. Hunt.
Sticking to the pirate code.
Yeah, stick to the pirate's code. Now, you may remember, those of you, that those who fall behind are left behind. Recently, the pirate's code applied, unfortunately, to a family. Julia said within seconds she realized recently she was facing a parent's worst nightmare. Where's one of the kids? She and her boyfriend were Ubering back to their place from a Toronto Raptors game because of a flat tire in the car. So Julia's 5-year-old daughter fell asleep in the back row during the ride. Once they arrived, before getting out of the vehicle, the couple, you know how it is when you have 4 kids, Jeff, you got to have that plan to get them all out of the car. So they hatched a plan. Julia grabs the garage door opener from her car so we can all get inside the house while her boyfriend starts unloading the other 3 kids, their car seats, and the winter coats because it's a chilly time there out of the Uber. Julia then would go back and get her sleeping daughter out of the back of the vehicle once the path to the back seat was clear. She was returning to the car when she saw the car drive away with her daughter still inside. No. Now, here's where it gets interesting. After the terrifying incident, she contacts Uber, and Uber's like, what can we do? Seriously.
What?
They contacted the police. It took the police an hour and a half to locate the driver and rescue the little girl, and Uber never lifted a finger. Never helped them, not even for a second. Now, Uber says, if you have something like this, we've got a web portal, and they didn't go through the portal thing, and they didn't do that. But they do feel very bad about it. They have offered Julia's boyfriend a $10 credit.
Go through the web portal when your daughter's...
Uh-huh. And the guy's just driving away because that's efficient.
Crazy French.
But again, don't worry about it. They were given a $10 voucher, so everything's okay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's something in the licensing user agreement that says you can't do anything about it.
Yes, and if you leave your kids in the car, we keep your kids.
Man, that's
yes.
a nightmare.
They're going to assemble the new iPhones. That's what's going to happen is we're going to catch the kids. Okay, sorry. Okay, Blake Olson, your choice, sir. A fool and money headed in different directions. Small grab equals big loss, or give me fuel, give me fire, give me that which I desire.
Ooh, small grab.
Yeah, small grab equals big loss. We head to Japan for this one. A bus driver with 29 years of service has lost his entire retirement, worth more than $84,000, because he was fired for stealing $7 from passenger fares. Happened recently where the man was accused of pilfering $7. And a couple of court cases, one court overturned the verdict and said, no, $7 is not a big deal. You can't take his retirement because of that. But just recently, the Supreme Court in Japan delivered the final ruling and said, no, the city is right, reinstating the original penalty. They said that the man's conduct could undermine the public's faith and trust in the system. And that is paramount. Yeah.
They're not playing
so
around in
he
Japan.
lost his retirement, $84,000 plus, for taking $7.
Oh, man.
I know. Wonder if it was worth it.
They have a strict code there.
Yeah, they do. All righty.
No doubt.
Now, yeah, but not the pirate code. That's a whole different. That's Uber. Okay. Now, Jeff Hunt, your choice, sir. Fool and money head in different directions, or give me fuel, give me fire, give me that which I desire.
Desire.
Yes. Give me fuel, give me fire, give me that which I desire. Someone out there may recognize the famous words of James Hetfield. That's from Fuel, Reload album. That's a side note there. We are still staying in Japan for this one. A Japanese man is left completely and totally heartbroken. His new love is gone. It's awful. A Japanese man who's an online content creator and music producer, Honkon is the name that he goes after, has shared on social media that the love of his life is now gone. His Ferrari has burnt to a crisp. Yes. Now he has saved for over 10 years to buy the Ferrari 458 Spider. The 33-year-old owned it for less than an hour. There was an engine problem when he started it. The engine caught fire, complete destruction. A Ferrari Spider runs about 300K. He said he's lost the car. He had it for less than 60 minutes. The love comes and love goes away. I don't know.
I mean, in
Ferrari's
Japan, they
kind of
don't
a
have
pain in the
warranties
ass,
on
too.
stuff. Who
Alrighty.
knows?
That's it. That's the end of your Tuesday News. Back to you, sir.
You're listening to Jeff and Bill.
This is 710 KNUS.
Welcome back to the Jeff and Bill Show. News Talk 710 KNUS. I'm your co-host, Jeff Hunt, along with Bill Thorpe, bringing you the freshest insights and hottest takes from the right, left, and center. Coming up here in just a second, Charles Gray's going to join us, Secretary of State, Wyoming. I want to go to Tony real quick. Tony, good morning. You're on the Jeff and Bill Show.
Morning.
Hey, good morning, guys. So I don't come with some answer or what I think is right or wrong. I more it's question. I'm hearing and reading that they're concerned that this may be a slippery slope type issue, and the example would be, say high school kids and their history in political science, and they're being they're being taught that, a president tried to overturn an election in 2020, and now the technical state of our government is a competitive, authoritative state, not a democracy. So I mean, that whole thing of where we are as our current state, and they're teaching that in high school. Now, would that be something that parents then would also be trying to? Some parents might say, well, we don't want our kids to know that.
I mean, look, I don't have a problem with parents knowing about all the curriculum. Make it all available. Have conversations with teachers.
No. Is that the type of thing that a parent would? I know. My question is that the type of thing that a parent would then have the right to withdraw their students? I think that what the school is concerned about is they could have all these exceptions, all these kids being withdrawn from one class or another, and their concern is they're not then getting the education they're supposed to be getting.
You're not seeing that. But on human sexuality, on the nature of marriage, on those types of things, you have serious debate in our public square about all that. And if parents are concerned about particular values being promoted, they have the right to opt their kids out.
Jeff, so I'm just asking you then. So for you, it is just strictly these questions around sexuality and so forth.
For me, it's everything. In fact, I don't think you should have your kids in government-run schools, period. I think they're terrible. I think they're agenda-driven.
They shouldn't learn about what?
Captured entirely by the progressive wing. And you should either look at charter schools or home schools or private schools. I think public school needs to die the death it deserves. But, Tony, we got to get to Charles here. I appreciate your time. All right, now it's time for Blake Olson.
Blake Olson.
Blake Olson, news and comment.
43 and sunny in Denver, expecting a high of 68 today. The 7-10 5-day forecast coming up. Our top story, as expected, Elon says he'll soon be spending a lot less time at Doge.
Starting probably in next month, May, my time allocation to Doge will drop significantly.
The Tesla CEO made the comments during his company's earnings call Tuesday. He added he'll spend a day or two per week working with Doge for as long as President Trump would like him to. And he also said he's not parting ways with Doge entirely.
I'll have to continue doing it for, I think, probably the remainder of the president's term, just to make sure that the waste and fraud that we stop does not come roaring back.
Congresswoman Lauren Boebert has sent a letter to Doge. She wants the federal government to stop funding a Colorado public transportation project, which could provide passenger rail service from Pueblo to Fort Collins. She says we need to spend more money fixing our roads. Amen. A federal judge has granted a temporary restraining order that prohibits the deportation of illegals from Colorado under the Alien Enemies Act. U.S. District Judge Charlotte Sweeney ruled that individuals subject to the AEA removal must receive at least 3 weeks' notice. It'll expire on May 6th, but it could be extended. You know, like a great cup of hot coffee in the morning, I need a little Stephen Miller to get me going this morning. Let's go.
You have the entire Democrat Party that is in love with this gangster in El Salvador who beat his wife, who's a member of a terrorist organization, who has code for MS-13 tattooed on his knuckles. And you've seen the amount of coverage, the amount of discussion over this one illegal alien gangster. What was the reprieve for Americans who watched their communities get occupied by these foreign gangs? Where was their due process? Where was their rights? Where was the media and where were the courts when their loved ones were getting beaten, raped, and murdered? That's who President Trump is fighting for, not foreign terrorists, Americans.
Yes, and I'm ready to go now. On with Laura Ingraham last night on Fox. 47 says illegal aliens should be deported without trials. He says countries like Venezuela and the Congo have emptied their prisons into the United States, and giving these immigrants trials would slow down the deportation process. The Trump administration is collecting private medical records from both federal and commercial databases for RFK Jr.'s new autism study. The study will include medication records from pharmacy chains, smartwatches, and fitness trackers. The body of Pope Francis is now lying in state at the Vatican. About 20,000 people filled St. Peter's Square to witness his body being carried to St. Peter's Basilica, where he will lie in state for 3 days before his funeral on Saturday. One of the most massive wildfires in the history of Ocean County, New Jersey, has burned more than 8,500 acres and forced thousands to evacuate. The flames are threatening more than 1,300 structures and have caused scores of power outages. The Department of Education is going to start collecting defaulted student loan debt again. The department announced collections will begin on May 5th, and borrowers could be referred to debt collectors or have money deducted from their paychecks. Rockies lose 4-3 to the Royals, and Game 3, the Avalanche and the Stars tonight in Lodo. They drop the puck at 7:30. Nuggets and the Clippers tomorrow, Game 3. 41 in Aurora, 40 in Arvada, 43 in Denver. Jeff and Billy continue on Hump Day. Blake Olson, News Talk 710 KNUS.
Some developing upslope will bring some changing weather to the Front Range in the days ahead. Temperatures will be slightly cooler, and chances of showers and thunderstorms will be going up. Highs today mid to upper 60s with scattered showers and thunderstorms this afternoon and tonight. Lows 40s. Highs will be 60s Thursday and near 60 Friday with scattered afternoon showers and thunderstorms possible both days. Weather sponsored by Colorado's Best Roofing, reminding you to protect your home from the harsh Colorado weather and schedule your free, no-obligation roof inspection today at roofingcolorado.com. That's roofingcolorado.com. Meteorologist Don Day in the 710 KNUS Weather Center.
All right, joining us on the Jeff and Bill Show is Charles Grays, the Secretary of State in Wyoming. Listen to some of the changes they're looking to bring about in Wyoming. Just think about where we are in Colorado with the very talented Jenna Griswold. Gold standard elections. Listen to what they want to do in Wyoming. Requiring proof of citizenship and residency for registering to vote. Banning ballot drop boxes. Strengthening Wyoming's voter ID statutes, banning ballot harvesting, imposing a durational residency requirement to vote in Wyoming, banning Zuck Bucks, instituting voter list maintenance to ensure clean voter rolls, paper ballots, hand audits, and counts of elections, banning ranked choice voting, and banning foreign funding of elections and ballot measures. And joining us to tell us about the types of changes he's trying to bring to Wyoming is the Secretary of State for Wyoming, Chuck Gray. Good morning, Chuck. Thanks for joining the Jeff and Bill Show.
Yeah, good morning.
Thanks for having me. We're up here in Cheyenne, and great to be on.
So, I'm all for border walls. You sure you don't want to build one between Wyoming and Colorado?
Hey, we're talking about it, Jeff. We are very concerned about what's going on in Colorado, and we are monitoring the situation because this legislative section down in Colorado has been a disaster. Ours up in Wyoming, we had the strongest in a decade with our Freedom Caucus majority in the House. But, boy, I've been reading about what's going on down here, and we all have, and we're very troubled.
Yeah, I wouldn't blame you. You know, we watch not only about the great leadership that's taking place in Wyoming, but for instance, when the sheriff put the billboard recruiting police up to Wyoming, where they could actually be police and supported by the community, as opposed to what our DAs and crazy progressive DAs down here in Colorado do to them. But let's talk about what you're trying to do to secure your elections in Wyoming. Give us an overview.
Well, thanks, Jeff. When we had our 2025 legislative session, which wrapped up about a month ago, we at the beginning decided to launch an election integrity vision because we had a Freedom Caucus majority in the House. We saw this opportunity for us to bring through and further become a leader on election integrity nationwide. So we launched this election integrity vision. The proof of citizenship and proof of residency bill was really the hallmark bill as part of this effort. And only citizens should be voting in U.S. elections, period. This is pretty basic. It has over 90% support from Americans. There's been Gallup polling. There's been Rasmussen polling on this issue. And we actually were in a year-long standoff with our governor on this issue. We tried to bring through proof of residency for registering to vote and proof of citizenship for registering to vote through a rule for the 2024 election, and unfortunately he vetoed that effort. So we decided to go to the legislature in the 2025 general session. And I'm proud to say that we brought through that bill with veto-proof majorities, and in our year-long standoff with the governor, he backed down, and we were able to bring that through and become a leader in the nation, the first in the nation, to have that proof of citizenship requirement for registering to vote in all races. And this is a little different from voter ID, which is showing that you are who you say you are when you show up at the polls. This is the registration process, which we also want to beef up on top of voter ID. We're continuing to work to ban the drop boxes. Unfortunately, we weren't able to bring that through, but we did bring through strengthening voter list maintenance, banning ranked choice voting, this very disturbing effort by the left to ram through ranked choice voting across our country. President Trump actually had some posts on X on this over the weekend, how we need to push back on ranked choice voting, and we're in the lead on that by banning it explicitly in state statute. And that really set the stage for our efforts to continue to strengthen our election integrity measures in Wyoming state law. And we're continuing to work with the administration on it. Their very important executive order to bring through proof of citizenship at the federal level. The Congress is attempting to do that through the SAVE Act. And we're proud to be leaders on election integrity up here in Wyoming.
We're talking with Charles Graves, the Secretary of State in Wyoming. Now, Charles, I was looking at the Wyoming presidential results of 2024. Donald Trump winning nearly 75% to 25%. Is voter interference with elections a real concern for Wyoming? It seems like it's a pretty conservative state. Do you need to add on all of these kind of forms and requirements when it comes to voting when you seem to be breaking pretty conservative already?
Well, Jeff, we're proud of our strong pro-Trump majorities in Wyoming. In fact, when I chaired the Wyoming delegation at the Republican National Convention, when we announced all of our delegates for President Trump, we actually pinpointed the fact that twice in a row we had the strongest majority for President Trump, and we were proud to make it 3 times in a row in 2024. But the polling shows statewide and nationally that people continue, Americans, Wyomingites continue to feel that we need to continue to strengthen our elections and our election integrity measures. We saw fully exposed all the weaknesses in our election process in 2020. And these measures that were brought through state by state in the intervening period from 2020 to 2024 have been pivotal. And we're going to continue to bring through those strengthening measures post-2024 election. And President Trump has talked about this when he signed that first executive order here about 3 weeks ago on election integrity. He said more are coming, and this is so important that we continue to strengthen elections. It is a priority of the Trump administration, and it is a priority of our administration up here in Wyoming.
That's Charles Gray, the Secretary of State for Wyoming. Now, Charles, I don't know if you have mail-in ballot voting in Colorado. It sounds like, or in Wyoming, but it sounds like after this you're not going to have that. But in Colorado, we do. And one of the arguments is, well, the toothpaste is out of the tube. People like to vote from their homes via mail-in balloting or dropping it off at a ballot box. What about ease of voting? What about convenience for working families? How do you balance that with election integrity and election security?
Everything in life is about balance. That's the word, and what we're trying to seek in our election integrity measures. There's a broad consensus amongst the electorate that what we've seen over the past decades went way too far against these basic election integrity measures that we had a broad consensus for in our country for over 200 years, and we continue to have a broad consensus for. I mean, I think back to 2017 when I first started out in the Wyoming State Legislature. Before becoming Secretary of State, I was a legislator, and in 2017, there was a coalition of insider Republicans, Democrats, the media that were trying to push through exactly what you were talking about, an all mail-in system, or at least changes that were going to move us toward a mail-in system. And as you just talked about, once the toothpaste is out of the tube, you can't pull it back. And the Secretary of State at the time, Ed Murray, who was a predecessor 3 secretaries ago, the governor at the time, Matt Mead, the state Senate, they all wanted this bill that would have gone against election integrity, and we were proud in the Wyoming State House to get up on third reading and swing 7 votes on that bill and make sure that that was going to fail. And that was before this issue was really at the forefront. And I look back on that vote. If we had gone down that road in 2017, Wyoming could very well be in a very similar position as you're seeing down there in Colorado. But we continue in Wyoming to have things we need to continue to improve upon. I mean, I think back just on the 2024 election where we caught the fact that one of our county clerks, the Weston County clerk, had used the incorrect version of a ballot, which led to incorrect results being reported to our office. We caught that and entered into sort of this 3-day negotiation / conflict with our county clerks before they finally backed down and agreed to hand count the ballots in that county. And it found that there was, in fact, errors in the count reported to the state because of that ballot alignment error. So we're continuing to work on the machine issue. President Trump, when he signed his first executive order 3 weeks ago, said that this is an issue he continues to want to work on. And we saw Tulsi Gabbard just a week and a half ago in a cabinet meeting point out that they're investigating this issue, the fact that these machines can be hacked, and we need to have controls and continued election integrity measures throughout our system. And so we continue to work on it, continue to strengthen our election integrity measures here in Wyoming, and that's what the people want. The polling shows it, and the results at the ballot box show it.
That's Charles Gray, the Wyoming Secretary of State, joining Jeff and Bill live. Currently, how do Wyoming citizens register to vote?
Currently, proof of identity for registering to vote is in the Secretary of State's rules. We always wanted to add proof of residency and proof of citizenship for registering to vote. And that's what we brought through the 2025 general session. It's what we were working to bring through with our rulemaking in 2023 that unfortunately our very liberal insider governor vetoed. He sort of infiltrated the Republican Party in 2018 when he first ran for governor, and he is not a conservative. We've seen time and time again the wind projects he's trying to bring through, the pushback he's had on our core industries, our coal industry, oil and gas industry, that He is working to fight allowing those industries to reach our full potential in our state. And this is another example of how he's weak, that he vetoed our rulemakings for proof of residency and proof of citizenship for registering to vote in early 2024. But we went to the legislature, we brought that through in the 25 general session, and now you're going to have sort of a three-pronged test for registering to vote, which is proof of identity, that you are who you say you are, proof of residency for registering to vote, that you actually live here, which is becoming an issue that I think we need to continue to bring to the forefront nationwide, and then proof of citizenship for registering to vote. So you're going to kind of have three boxes in the registration process, and that's really, I think, going to be the gold standard nationwide, this three-check process. Now, we saw the SAVE Act pass the U.S. House here 2 weeks ago. I was in Washington when it passed, and that is proof of citizenship for registering to vote at the federal level. They're working to bring that through in federal statute, and then President Trump is working to bring that through the federal voter registration form, which is part of the National Voter Registration Act, which passed in the early 1990s, and that was the executive order that he signed here 3 weeks ago. So we've got a lot going. We've got the state-based efforts that are working to bring this through, and then we have the federal as well.
That's Wyoming Secretary of State Charles Gray. So under these changes, does it impact the voting process? How would someone who is a Wyoming resident vote in an upcoming election? What would be their process?
Well, first you would need to register to vote if you weren't already registered. If you are registered, then that first sort of election integrity measure, that first security measure, that checkbox has been checked. But if you register to vote, then you would need to show proof of identity, then proof of residency, and those procedures we're working to bring through via the rulemaking process here by the July 1st deadline for the enactment date of the bill that was just passed through the Wyoming State Legislature that we worked to pass. And then the final box would be proof of citizenship for registering to vote. And that aligns, the documents for proof of citizenship for registering to vote aligns with the SAVE Act that passed at the federal level. Now, it's important to note, because of the security measures with Wyoming driver's licenses, if you have a Wyoming driver's license that has a Wyoming address on it and your photo on it, that is very clear, you will be able to achieve all three of those boxes with the Wyoming driver's license because of the security measures that are in place.
I hate to cut you off, Mr. Gray, but what I'm looking at is I'm directly looking for the process. If I'm a Wyoming resident, how do I go about casting my ballot? I'm going to assume I'm already qualified to vote. I'm not talking about that. I'm just curious about how this system, if it does at all, change the process for someone voting in Wyoming. On Election Day or as it's approaching, what is the process to a valid registered voter? I'm just curious.
Well, first you register to vote, and then you go to the polls and say your name, and then have voter ID to confirm that you are who you say you are. If you're on the rolls, the same-day registration process that Wyoming has had since the early 1990s remains in place, so you can also register to vote at the polls. But it's the same process from 30,000 feet up. It's just those basic election integrity measures that have over 90% support from Americans are in place. So you register to vote, and then you come on Election Day, and you have voter ID, and you cast your ballot. We also have the 28 days.
How do they cast their, Mr. Gray, how do they cast their ballot? Is it an electronic system where I walk into the booth and I work with the computer? Is it the old lever system that runs on rolls of paper, or am I given a paper ballot a la Bush Gore 2000 in Florida, and I have a little punch card or something like that? What is the mechanism? I'm just curious, what's the mechanism for voting inside of Wyoming? Is it electronic? Is it paper? What goes on?
Great question, and we're looking forward to continuing to work with the Trump administration on this issue. 22 of 23 counties in Wyoming, the default method of casting the ballot is a pen to paper ballot that is then placed into a tabulator. Now, in one county, the county I am currently in, which is where the capital is, Laramie County, which is where Cheyenne is, it is the highest populated county in our state. The default method of casting a ballot is a touchscreen, which prints out a ballot that then you place into a tabulator. One of the problems with that, though, is that while there are names on the ballot which correspond, assuming the machine is doing its job with what you pressed on the touchscreen, it is actually a barcode on the top of that printed out ballot that casts the ballot. And that's very, very problematic because nobody can read a Scantron barcode. I certainly couldn't. I had always cast my ballot before becoming the Wyoming Secretary of State in my home county, which is Natrona County, where we have pen-to-paper ballots. But for the first time, because now I'm a Laramie County resident, cast my ballot down here. It is a very unsatisfying experience when you have this paper printed out that has a barcode on the top of the ballot that is casting the ballot. So we were working through the legislature to bring through a requirement for pen-to-paper ballots, and that is one of the things the Trump administration is also working on. The executive order that was signed 3 weeks ago requires the Election Assistance Commission at the federal level to look at revising their standards to require pen-to-paper ballots, and we're working with the EAC on that requirement and with the Trump administration. Hopefully we can bring that through the state legislature. Unfortunately, a coalition of insiders, Democrats, and the media stopped that bill, so we've not been able to bring that through.
Charles Gray, Wyoming Secretary of State, how do you count the ballots then? Once you've done that, are they hand counted? And all I'm looking for is, are they hand counted or are they run through a machine and counted that way? What's the process for tabulating the votes after the vote is cast?
In all 23 counties, whether there is a pen-to-paper ballot or a touchscreen, the ballots are placed into a tabulator, and that is an issue we are continuing to work on. We had the first hand count now in decades in Wyoming when we caught the issue in Weston County where they used the wrong version of the ballots up there, which caused a ballot alignment error and led to incorrect results being reported to the state of Wyoming. And they did a hand count up there. It went very quickly. And we made sure that hand count happened, and they reported the correct results to the state a few days after the election. And so that was a good test on hand counting, which we're continuing to work on. We do have a ballot, an audit of the ballot images that occurs within 48 hours of the election, but we need to continue to work on this issue, and the Trump administration is as well.
Okay, now in your work, Charles Gray, Wyoming Secretary of State, looking at making sure you have election integrity and security, how prevalent is voter fraud inside of Wyoming? How many fraudulent votes have you found, and what elections were swung based on these fraudulent votes that were cast that weren't legally valid?
Well, this is sort of a talking point that the insiders use in their coalition with the left-wing media up here in Wyoming and then also nationally. And the problem with this argument of how many cases have you found is without the election integrity measures in place, without those upfront measures in place, how are you going to be able to catch the instances of fraud? So it's unbelievable. And I was one of the things that got me involved in the election integrity space was as a legislator bringing through the voter ID bill in 2021 in Wyoming, House Bill 75, which we brought through, making voter ID the law of the land up here in Wyoming. And it's incredible to watch the left-wing media continue to use this line where they say, how many instances of ballot fraud have you found with voter impersonation? I asked back, how on earth are we going to be able to find these instances of fraud when you don't have the upfront election integrity measures, when you don't have voter ID? So it's a circular argument that the left-wing media uses, and we've really debunked it up here and been very successful in doing that. There is a broad consensus for these upfront election integrity measures, over 90% support across our nation, and we're going to continue to work to bring through those measures that have broad-based support.
Yeah, I appreciate the answer, Charles Gray, Wyoming Secretary of State, but you never directly addressed how prevalent voter fraud is inside of Wyoming. And the Heritage Foundation, not a bastion of liberals, has done a decade-long study and hasn't found a large swath of voter impersonation or fraud, and nothing that would swing an election. Heritage isn't a bunch of liberals, and they're not contributing to liberal talking points. So how prevalent is voter fraud in Wyoming that we need these electoral security measures?
And this is another one of the golden oldie grab bag of cheap lines that the media uses, which is this Heritage, very important database that Heritage started a few years ago, and it's only been in place for a few years, and they really ramped it up after the 2020 election, and they've been very frank about this database, which is it's really off the reporting that is done by the mainstream media, and very rarely the mainstream media will report on any of these instances of fraud. For example, we had an instance of fraud up here where an illegal alien voted in an election in 2020, and the media never reported on it. So Heritage didn't have it on their database until we sent it over to them. And so the database doesn't have every single instance. They say that. Now, the media never points out these caveats on the database that are all there in the print, very large point font. I think it's actually 15-point font in case you can't read the 12-point font. But we've gotten very used to these election integrity pushback from the mainstream media, and it's wrong, these arguments that are brought. There's a broad-based support for these measures, and it's because the American people understand that these measures are common sense. And we continue.
Well, I mean, Charles Gray, I got to interrupt you there. Wyoming Secretary of State Charles Gray. Part of the reason that this could have large support is because there were a bunch of people that lied to them about an election that was being stolen and things were sideways. I mean, there are people that have been paying out hundreds of millions of dollars for things and lies that were told on the air. And I appreciate that you finally got into the idea that you have one voter fraud case inside of Wyoming. Now, is the idea of going back to the hand counts and being able to tabulate?
It certainly wasn't a lie, sir, when we pushed back on your Secretary of State, Jenna Griswold, and the effort to try to remove President Trump from the ballot, which was just astounding. I mean, you want to talk about attacks on our republic.
Mr. Gray, hang on. I'm going to stop you there. I'm going to stop you there, Mr. Gray. We're not discussing what Jenna Griswold did, and I pilloried her for that action. I think she was absolutely duplicitous. She was forced to defend the state, but then when she joined the case on the side of the plaintiffs, going to the Supreme Court, was absolutely atrocious. She should be pilloried for that, and we can agree on that one, but that is a side to what we're doing. I'm talking about the idea of, is it the fact that you have a smaller population that makes it easier to do things like hand counts and paper ballots than a larger population like Colorado? Do we face hurdles you may not?
It was just appalling to see the actions of the radical left down there in Colorado. I applaud the Colorado Republican Party, and we partnered with them in filing amicus briefs and pushing back on what the radical left was trying to do.
What about the population? Sir, what about the population? You're starting off on something else. I hate to. We're running out of time. I don't mean to interrupt you like this. I'm not trying to be difficult, but I'm looking at the idea of population comparison. Does your smaller population make measures like this easier than it would be in somewhere like a Colorado or somewhere like a California or New York or Florida?
Well, it's just really important to push back because you're talking about being a bastion of small R Republican values, and the left's effort to prevent us from having a basic election flied in the face of that. But, you know, I think that your point that there are different population levels in different states is something that we continue to consider, and why in Wyoming, with our small population that we're very proud of, we are continuing to work through being a leader on these issues so we can sort of provide a model to states like Colorado that struggle with, one, the radical left, and that legislature you have down there, and the fact that, yes, there is a higher population, but we're working to become a leader in Wyoming on these issues and continuing to work to sort of be that model.
Well, Charles Gray, Secretary of State, Wyoming, I appreciate you taking time to join the Jeff and Bill show. I will tell you, you're doing much better than Jana Griswold is doing in the state of Colorado. She wants to be governor now, and that's what we've got to deal with. So build a wall, and if you want to keep us out from moving there, I at least would understand. Secretary of State of Wyoming, Charles Gray, thank you for taking time to join us this morning.
Yes, thanks for having me on, and it was a pleasure. Really appreciate presenting these issues and continuing to talk about it.
All right, give us a phone call. What do you think about what they're doing in Wyoming? 720-819-5115 is the text line, 720-819-5115, Dan Caplis Law text line, or give us a call at 303-696-1971. I want to talk to you about our friends over at Alarm Detection Systems. Reliability isn't optional when business security is on the line. It's essential. Businesses trust alarm detection systems for the highest level of service and expertise. Think about the time you could save using one source for cameras, keycard access, fire, and intrusion systems. ADS offers expert alarm installation and testing by highly trained technicians, 24/7 professional monitoring, same-day or next-day service upon request because downtime isn't an option, dedicated teams for cameras, access control, fire alarms, and over 300 security professionals working for you. Choosing ADS means your business stays protected and will be ready to open tomorrow. They combine human monitoring with the latest AI camera technology to prevent crime in real time. Trusted by small and large businesses, including many Colorado schools, their security experts will review your system for free. Go to adsalarm.com and schedule your appointment today. adsalarm.com, alarm detection systems, the first choice of Front Range and Colorado businesses, adsalarm.com. We'll continue with your phone calls and texts, and boy, are they coming in, including a lot of folks from Wyoming. You're listening to The Jeff and Bill Show.
This is Denver's talk leader, News Talk 710 KNUS.
Welcome back to the Jeff and Bill Show. Just wrapping up an interview with Chuck Grace, the Wyoming Secretary of State. They want to require proof of citizenship, residency, and photo ID to confirm who you are. Your driver's license will do all that, but here in Colorado, for instance, you just need a utility bill. Just show up with a utility bill, and you can register to vote. They're banning ballot harvesting. They want to get rid of the ballot drop boxes in Wyoming, and we've got jam-packed phone lines. Let's go to the phones. Joe in Arvada. Good morning, Joe. You're on with Jeff and Bill.
Hey, good morning.
Wow, it was just fabulous. I'm sorry I have my TV on. I can't find my remote. Charles Gray was the only person I've heard on your station that said that Tulsi Gabbard had identified that the Dominion voting machines are hackable from the outside. That's our Director of National Intelligence, Billy. And I'm proud of you, Billy, for not hanging up on Charles. That's really kind. And also, he identified that in Wyoming, you would be considered on the far left. So I know you say you're not, but I think Charles begs to differ.
Yeah, I understand where he sits politically, and I get that. Did you notice the vast number of fraudulent voter things that happened in Wyoming that he could point to? Oh, yeah, no.
He mentioned the one that they caught thousands. The one that they caught, but in Texas they caught 60,000 illegal voters on the voting rolls. I propose to you there's 200,000 here in Colorado, and in Texas they proved that many of them had voted. How do you like that, Billy? And when they are interviewed and when they're asked, 29% said they voted in the last election. Doink!
Yeah, I'm not specifically familiar with that 60,000 voter case, but I haven't seen anything
well,
that
then
shows
you should pay
large
attention.
numbers. No, I do, Joe, but many times I've seen the stuff that you bring to the table with respect ends up evaporating later on. You had people for years.
Nonsense. You just don't look.
No, Joe, I did for years. You kept telling us
60,000.
Joe, for years. Joe, for years you called in.
Go look it up.
Joe, for years you called in talking about, here's the court case. It's finally going to expose all of this
Billy.
stuff.
Google.
Okay, I will go look at this afterwards, Joe, but I will not be surprised if your conclusion isn't necessarily the one that is presented, because that has been my experience with you in the past.
Tulsi Gabbard also begs to differ. I ask you, have Tulsi Gabbard on. Ask Tulsi Gabbard to explain to you that Dominion voting machines can be hacked. Why don't you ask our National Intelligence Director?
Here's the thing that almost any system necessarily can be hacked if it's connected to the internet and there are other protocols.
It is connected to the internet.
No,
Genius.
Joe. No, genius.
Yes,
it's not.
It is.
No, the
it
protocols.
It was proven to be
Joe.
connected to the internet.
No,
Billy.
Joe. No, it wasn't. They
Yes,
weren't
it was.
Here in Colorado.
Well, then
wait,
get
Joe.
the National
Here in Colorado.
Director of...
Hang on, Joe. Stop for a sec. Was it proven, Joe, was it proven that the voting machines here in Colorado were connected to the internet during the process of voting? No, it wasn't, but thank you. I appreciate that. It wasn't. Joe, it wasn't.
But, I mean, you had Jenna Griswold testifying in the State House saying that they cannot be connected to the internet, and Heidi Ganahl proved that they can be.
I know, but the issue being that that's part of the trusted build and that goes on is the idea that mechanisms are turned off. It's been removed in some of them, but it actually has been turned off, and that's part of what the trusted build does. You know, the thing that nobody trusts. It actually makes sure and ensures that there is no connectivity to the internet. The county clerk is supposed to ensure there's no connectivity to the internet, that those things are turned off. And inside a computer system, stuff has to be flipped as far as a switch. It doesn't happen without an operator making an affirmative choice or a negative choice. So when the default is to have it off, someone has to go in there to turn it on. All of those keystrokes, all that access would be categorized and cataloged by the computer system. We haven't seen any of that. The fact that it has the ability doesn't mean it was connected, is connected, nor manipulated by.
I think the problem is you had a Secretary of State saying that they couldn't.
I know,
be,
but I'm just trying to deal in fact and reality. I understand, and Jenna Griswold's wrong on a long list of things, tremendously long list of things that she's wrong about. The other thing is, if it's not connected to the internet, you have no ability from the outside to hack into the system to turn it on and gain access in the first place. That's what had to be done.
We'll get to these other phone calls. By the way, Joe's line is open, 303-696-1971. You're listening to The Jeff and Bill Show.
This is Denver's Talk Leader, News Talk 710 KNUS.
Welcome back to the Jeff and Bill Show. Wrapping up our conversation with Charles Grays, the Secretary of State in Wyoming. They do it a lot differently up there. Is it based upon population that they can get away with hand count, vote in person, that type of thing? Let's go to Mary in Wyoming. Good morning, Mary. You're on the Jeff and Bill Show.
Morning.
Hi, good morning. There was two things that I wanted to say. The first one is how they're tightening up on the residency. When I came from Colorado, I just gave them I went to the driver's license bureau, gave them my old license, and they issued a new one. And when they, they punch your old one, your old Colorado one. And then this last time when I renewed, was required to have my birth certificate, a utility bill, and then my old driver's license. I got a star on it. And that's part of that SMART program that they talk about it.
The real
so
ID.
That's going real ID. So that now says that I will not have to deal. That it hits all the boxes. I want to address Billy regarding fraudulent. That unfortunately the gentleman only talked about one. A lot of it was processes. And I do know, because I know on one, I'm back in the 2020 election, because of what I let the Republican Party know, it got tightened up. They would send out ballots. I have an older neighbor that I was helping, wanted her to vote in the 2020. I called and they sent out a ballot, and I remember after that happened, I was like, wait a minute. They didn't know I told them that I was doing it for a neighbor. And they said, no identification, nothing. In other words, I got a ballot. So I'm just saying that got tightened up for the 2024.
Mary, I think
regarding fraud.
Mary, I think it's a fair critique that, look, where's the widespread ballot fraud? But I also think it's a critique to say, well, we don't have the tools to know right now. All right, you're listening to the Jeff and Bill Show.
710 KNUS.
Welcome back to the Jeff and Bill Show. We've got full phone lines as we are discussing how Wyoming's doing their voting and the changes they're making. Chuck Gray joined us. He was the Secretary of State, and they're doing a lot to try to strengthen their election integrity up there and lock it down, make sure it's secure. Very different from Colorado, where you can just show up with a pay stub and register to vote here in Colorado, or an electric bill. Let's go back to the phone lines. Bill, what do you want to do? Ben. All right. Ben and Morrison. Good morning, Ben. You're on the Jeff and Bill Show.
Good morning.
Hey, good morning. How's it going? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
Yeah. This is somebody that's looking for a solution in search of a problem that doesn't exist, is quite frankly what it is. I mean, you mentioned this earlier, Billy. The Heritage Foundation has been keeping track of this stuff since 1988 for voter fraudulent cases. And do you know what the total is? 1,576 out of every single federal election since 1988. That's how many cases of fraud the Heritage Foundation, one of the most conservative organizations in the country, has documented and found. And one of the biggest cases of that was in one of the Carolinas, I can't remember if it's north or south, in 2018, when the Republicans were running around nursing homes and gathering up ballots and getting signatures and leaving them blank and then filling them in. So, like, that's what the voter fraud situation is. And that
question I got for you, though, is if in, like, the state of Colorado, all you need is a utility bill to register to vote or a pay stub, no ID, doesn't have to check any of that, how would you know if people are voting if they're not legit?
Generally, those people do have to file other documents in order to get to that status. They have to file registrations. They have to provide birth certificates. There's other things that go along. If you get like a driver's license, for example, there's a black line that comes on your driver's license that says this person is not eligible to vote in federal elections. So there's other apparatuses that go into place other than that.
I mean, we put into
so
place,
that's misleading. Well, that's misleading what you're saying. It's wrong, is what I'm saying. Is what you're saying is just wrong, factually.
No, I mean, Ben, what I'm pointing out, though, is we put into place efforts to protect the integrity of our vote, even here in Colorado. So why do you critique Wyoming for just putting in more stringent efforts?
Because what it does is it eliminates people who, for example, like women who have changed their name.
How?
You know, they have to provide, because if you change your name all of a sudden, and if you can't find your birth certificate, for example, like there's a lot of people, like if I had to go get my birth certificate, I'd have to go to my parents' house and run through all their stuff.
But if you change your name, you're going to get a different driver's license anyways. And in Wyoming, a driver's license would qualify.
Yeah, but what if that happened within the last year? Do you necessarily always go replace your driver's license every single year? Like, no, a lot of people don't.
If you get,
so it
if
could
you
go,
get married,
because I think mine's good for 6 years or something in Colorado, something like that.
Yeah, but if you get married,
I may have not
replaced
it.
Changed.
Not necessarily. Like some people don't.
If you change your name, you're not going to change your driver's license.
Not necessarily. Some people just don't do that. And now all of a sudden I can't vote because I got married and my last name has changed. Now I'm an invalidated voter when I'm perfectly legal.
Have you watched somebody get married? Like, has your spouse had to change their name?
No.
Yeah, so I mean, so when they do, it's a whole lot of things, right? When somebody gets married, you're going through Social Security, your 401ks, like all that stuff gets updated and changed. Why all of a sudden is requiring that change to be clear to vote something that is terrible when everything else you go through, your driver's license, your bank accounts, all that stuff gets updated?
It's just an extra hurdle. And there's other people, for example, that can't find, that don't have a passport. They don't have, they don't have their birth certificate still. There's other people like that exist that are perfectly legal U.S. citizens. Yeah, the main point of this is, Jeff, is that these people, there's not a massive amount of voter fraud that's happening.
How do you know?
It's a fake argument. Because we've done studies after study after study, and we know it's a fake argument. It's not something that's rampant. Donald Trump lost the 2020 election. Donald Trump lost the 2020 election, and you guys just can't build up the cojones to acknowledge that.
Now you're changing the subject. What I'm asking is, and I think it's a fair critique. I think it's a fair critique on both sides, right? One, where are the examples of mass fraud taking place? Okay, fair critique. You should be able to have to deliver that. But I think it's also a fair critique to go, look, the way things are set up right now, I'm not sure we would know. If someone could show up in Colorado with a pay stub, and we all know companies out there that hire illegal immigrants, if you can show up in Colorado with a pay stub and register to vote, that's a huge gap.
Isn't that same day voting? Isn't that same day voting that you show up with a pay stub?
No.
I'm not familiar with just a pay stub being the only requirement to register to vote in far as Colorado, because you have paperwork you have to fill out if you're going to vote online, etc. And I'm unfamiliar, but I don't believe that a pay stub is the only verification that you have to provide.
When that gap exists and people want to address that gap, all of a sudden they're voter conspiracy theorists when we have existing requirements that we put out there anyways. We just want to strengthen it.
Well, one of the things that Charles Gray, Ben, hang on just a second. One of the things that Charles Gray talked about is he said, well, the media doesn't cover all the instances of voter fraud, that the one instance they have in Wyoming wasn't covered and picked up by the Heritage Foundation. Okay, so they didn't get the one. However, if you had hundreds of thousands of cases of this across the country, yes, it would have media attention, and that's where Charles Gray's logic falls, because if there was a significant number of them, a la cases of measles, we'd see them in the media because they would be unusual. The media records and reports the unusual and not the usual. So if it existed on a large scale, we would see it.
Yeah, there was a study that was done by the Trump Organization, if you remember, after he lost the popular vote in 2016, and he went through and was trying to get all the voter ballots and everything like that because he lost the popular vote to Hillary Clinton. He was claiming, oh, it was illegal immigrants that made this happen. I didn't lose the popular vote to Hillary Clinton. And then he got all the information from all the states, and then he ended up dropping it because I think the information that was coming through was he wasn't finding any illegal immigrants voting. He was losing that battle, and he wanted to save face. It's not a deal.
Ben, I just don't understand why we're okay with some requirements to make sure that our voting is secure, but other ones are too burdensome. And, I mean, the idea that because a woman gets married, that all of a sudden, even though she has to change everything else in her life to be clear that she is who she says she is when she goes to vote, is all of a sudden too burdensome. I just don't see it. Ben, I appreciate the call. Thanks so much. His line is open, 303-696-1971. Let's do one more. You want to do Jack in Wyoming? Good morning, Jack. You're on the Jeff and Bill Show.
Morning.
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation, and you both have very good points, and I'm engaged in this. But isn't Missouri the show me state? Is it Missouri?
Yeah, that would be Missouri. We were talking with the Secretary of State from Wyoming, though.
Okay, well, that's where I'm going. Wyoming is the common sense state. And I think that the things that Charles Gray put in place to try to certify that people are legitimately qualified to vote, I think that is nothing more than common sense. And while every state has the right to do it however they want to do it, I think adopting what they've done in Wyoming is probably a perfect pattern for them to adopt, whether they will or not.
Jack,
that's up to them.
I got a question for you. Now, this comes to us from also Wyoming resident Mary. She and I had spoken off the air a little bit, and one of the things that she's concerned about is fraud, and the idea being that someone could be, like you are, have feet in both states, where you have businesses and you go back and forth between the two states. Would you, now I'm not saying that you did. But what I'm asking is she's concerned about someone being able to vote in both Wyoming and Colorado before these rules are in place. Now, to your experience, Jack, would you think that you have the ability, just based on, let's just say the systems is flawed and all the other problems that we have inside of them, do you feel that you would be able to cast a ballot under the current system, not with the changes, both in Wyoming and Colorado? I just want your opinion on it. What do you think? Do you think you'd be able to?
I do, and I have.
Okay.
I do, and I have.
Now, oh no, I was going to ask you, how soon, when did you, I'm not going to have you ask that. You don't, I always say, do never in public or on radio or when anything's recorded, admit to any of your crimes. So you have. So the only thing I'm curious about, was it because you received one mail ballot from Colorado and you voted in person in Wyoming? Was it 2 mail ballots? I'm just looking at the functionality. How were both ballots cast? Again, I'm not looking at time frame or when it happened. What was the functionality?
Well, it's not that simple, Billy.
Okay, cool.
Okay, if you own land in a state, you can vote on local issues. You don't have to be a resident. You don't have to be registered.
Oh, so
now on federal elections, it's different. You can only vote in one state that you claim residency in. I own property in both states, and I can switch my residency anytime I want to.
That's
just
true.
by notifying the Secretary of State.
Yeah, but
now,
you couldn't do it in the Fed.
case,
You couldn't do it in a federal election, though. But yeah, okay. That would make sense.
Federal and
one or the
local
other.
is different.
Okay, cool. Cool. Okay, that's cool.
On the federal level, when you're talking about the Congress, when Liz Cheney came up, I notified the Secretary of State that my residency officially will be in Wyoming, so I could vote against Liz Cheney because she's a disaster. So that's legal, and I did that. Okay, when I got done with that, I changed my residency through the Secretary of State to Colorado. So in the last presidential election, I could vote against the Democrats. I don't vote for a policy. I vote against. I vote against what I consider to be a detriment to the country, and that is the Communist Democrat Party. I vote against them in whichever state I need to do it. In Wyoming, on federal elections, they don't need my support because going back to my opening statement, Wyoming is a common sense state. Wyomingites don't vote for Democrats because they're too smart to do that. Thank you.
I appreciate that, Jack. That's really insightful, and I appreciate you talking about how you could possibly cast a vote in both states, but it wouldn't be the federal, it would be the local. Thank you. That was very insightful.
Jack,
I appreciate that,
Appreciate it. Phone lines open, 303-696-1971. Now is time for Blake Olson.
Blake Olson.
Blake Olson, news and comment.
45 and sunny in Denver, expecting a high of 68 today. The 7-10 5-day forecast coming up. Our top story, 47, says China has to make a trade deal. DJT said China needs to sell its goods to the U.S., and he's confident they will come to the bargaining table soon. He added that the U.S. is losing $2 trillion in trade across the globe, and those days are over. A federal judge is modifying an order blocking the deportation of illegals from Colorado. Tim McDonald with the ACLU sought the order to keep immigration authorities from deporting Venezuelans accused of having ties to Tren de Aragua.
They need to follow due process so they don't make the kind of mistakes that we know they are making right now, shipping people to El Salvador and then calling it an oopsie.
Oh, yeah, an oopsie. U.S. District Court Judge Charlotte Sweeney ruled Tuesday that immigration officials must provide 21 days notice before taking any action to deport illegals under the Alien Enemies Act. The Denver judge also ruled that anyone facing deportation must be allowed to challenge their removal from the U.S. May 6th is the expiration date of the order, but it could be extended. All right. After all that, I need a little Stephen Miller.
You have the entire Democrat Party that is in love with this gangster in El Salvador who beat his wife, who's a member of a terrorist organization, who has code for MS-13 tattooed on his knuckles. And you've seen the amount of coverage, the amount of discussion over this one illegal alien gangster. What was the reprieve for Americans who watched their communities get occupied by these foreign gangs? Where was their due process? Where was their rights? Where was the media and where were the courts when their loved ones were getting beat and raped and murdered? That's who President Trump is fighting for, not foreign terrorists, Americans.
On Fox last night, once again, I can't get enough of Stephen Miller. Charles Gray, Wyoming Secretary of State, on with Jeff and Billy last hour. I'm sure you've heard it. And a lot of us feel Colorado needs to dial in on election integrity like Wyoming.
We saw fully exposed all the weaknesses in our election process in 2020. And these measures that were brought through state by state in the intervening period from 2020 to 2024 have been pivotal. And we're going to continue to bring through those strengthening measures post-2024 election. And President Trump has talked about this when he signed that first executive order here about 3 weeks ago on election integrity. He said more are coming, and this is so important that we continue to strengthen elections.
Elon says that paid protesters are responsible for the automaker's decline in earnings this year. On Tuesday, Elon said protesters have been targeting Tesla since he started with Doge. He also said, as expected, he'll soon be spending a lot less time at Doge.
Starting probably in next month, May, my time allocation to Doge will drop significantly.
He made the comments during his company's earnings call Tuesday. He added he'll spend a day or two per week working with Doge for as long as President Trump would like him to. He also said he's not parting ways with Doge entirely.
I'll have to continue doing it for, I think, probably the remainder of the president's term, just to make sure that the waste and fraud that we stop does not come roaring back.
The body of Pope Francis is now lying in state at the Vatican. On Wednesday, his body was taken to St. Peter's Basilica, where it will lie in state for 3 days of public viewing until Saturday's funeral. DJT will be there once again. The acting governor of New Jersey is declaring a state of emergency where a raging wildfire is forcing thousands to evacuate. About 3,000 evacuations have been ordered in Ocean and Lacey townships, where multiple roads have been closed off, and over 1,300 structures are being threatened by the wildfire. The Trump administration is collecting private medical records from both federal and commercial databases for RFK Jr.'s new autism study. The study will include medication records from pharmacy chains, smartwatches, and fitness trackers. The Rockies lose 4-3 to the Royals. And hockey tonight, Stanley Cup playoffs, Game 3. It's tied at 2, Dallas and Colorado. As the Avs try to take a 2-1 lead tonight, they drop the puck at 7:30 in Lodo. Nuggets, Game 3 with the Clippers tomorrow night in Southern California. 42 in Brighton, 43 in Louisville, and 45 in Denver. Jeff and Billy continue on Hump Day. I think. Maybe.
Some developing upslope will bring some changing weather to the Front Range in the days ahead. Temperatures will be slightly cooler, and chances of showers and thunderstorms will be going up. Highs today, mid to upper 60s, with scattered showers and thunderstorms this afternoon and tonight. Lows 40s. Highs will be 60s Thursday and near 60 Friday, with scattered afternoon showers and thunderstorms possible both days. Weather sponsored by Colorado's Best Roofing, reminding you to protect your home from the harsh Colorado weather and schedule your free, no-obligation roof inspection today at roofingcolorado.com. That's roofingcolorado.com. Meteorologist Don Day in the 710 KNUS Weather Center.
Welcome back to the Jeff and Bill Show. I've been impressed with this guy on X, and he seems to be tapping into a change that's happening in the Democrat Party, and we've been communicating back and forth and talking about having him on, and he's live in studio with us. Deep Singh Badesha. I think I got it right. Did I get it right? Am I close?
It's close enough. Good enough for government work, as some would say.
And you were on with Caldera recently. I don't want to assume your political affiliation. I think you're progressive in your political activities. But, I've been noticing it's been lining up with things I've been noticing, too, is that there's a change happening in the Democrat Party. But welcome to the Jeff and Bill Show.
Yeah,
yes, welcome.
Excited to be here. Yeah, as you said, I am a Democrat, so I actually went through a small libertarian phase. So I grew up in Colorado Springs, Colorado.
Yeah.
So growing up in that environment, everybody around me was, I would say like I was there was one Sikh kid. I'm Sikh, follower of Sikhism, and a friend of mine who was Muslim. And then everybody else was like very, very Christian. So I grew up in that environment, grew up libertarian. And it wasn't until later that I'm like, I think I'm a Democrat, actually.
Yeah.
I think I'm more liberal than this.
Well, you're a political strategist, and you've been talking about something I've been noticing, too, because I went to the Bernie rally. And I worked for Mitt Romney when he was at Red Rocks, and that was 10,000 that turned out for that. And we're like, whoa, huge turnout for Mitt Romney back in 2012. You had Barack Obama, 80,000 at Mile High Stadium. And I go to all these political rallies. I hadn't seen anything in like a decade since like what I saw with Bernie and AOC down at the Civic Center. And I went, I think I'm seeing a change in the Democrat Party, at least Colorado's Democrat Party, where kind of what we would call the old, pale, stale, Michael Bennet, John Hickenlooper, just don't seem to be doing it for the Democrats anymore. They want real fighters. And you have been talking about that. There's kind of a change happening in the Democrat Party. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I feel like there is a lot of energy to reform and change things. And the things I've been mentioning to people, and the things I say over and over again, is the Democratic Party is less popular than Republicans and Trump. Democrats think they're going to win 2026 and 2028 back. They're going to win Congress back and the White House back because Trump is so unpopular. But what they fail to know is that Democrats are way less popular with their own base and the general public than Republicans and Trump is. And you have to ask yourself why. Why is that? What is happening? And it's interesting is that after parties get walloped, they kind of go back to their grassroots and they kind of have to listen to their people and see what's going on. In 2010, you saw this with the Republicans. Republicans got walloped in 2008. And, Republicans were coming out with these blueprints and saying like, hey, how do we change the party? What do we have to do? No one would have imagined that the Tea Party would have came out of that in 2010. And no one would imagine that Donald Trump would have ignited this populism underneath that, right? I think they went back to the voters with Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney did not really work out. So you see this similar kind of ebbing and flowing with the Democratic Party right now, where people, Americans know they're getting a raw deal. Whether you're Republican, you're an independent, like many people are in the state, or you're a Democrat, Americans feel like you're getting a raw deal. They don't know exactly who's giving them the raw deal, right? If you listen to Trump, it's immigrants and it's China and it's these people who have kind of sold you out, these like globalist elites, as you would say. And if you listen to liberals, though, I was at the DNC. I sat there at the DNC, was there all 4 days, and I listened to Kamala speak. I listened to a lot of people speak. And she's like, nothing will change. Everything's good. We're going to keep on going. And that's not what the American people feel. So what you see this energy coming from is that Bernie Sanders and AOC and the progressive left are the only people talking to the real pain of Americans, right? They're the only people saying like, hey, we need to change things, right? The systems are not working for you. And I think that's something you can see in the Gen Z population too. So one of the things about Gen Z, you might have seen these statistics, is that Gen Z men in particular, but Gen Z overall, are becoming more conservatives than baby boomers, right? Democrats had it in their mind that, hey, we're going to be winning elections because young folks are going to be with us. But if you look at Gen Z, in particular at the COVID timeline, if you were Gen Z in K-12 before COVID, you're still pretty progressive. You're still like, you align with almost millennials in terms of your voting behavior. But if you were in school after COVID, they're very, very conservative. And you have to ask yourself why. And I think Bernie's kind of tapping into this, AOC's tapping into this, other commentators on the left are tapping into this. It's that the institutions are broken. And if you were in Gen Z and you were in high school and you saw everything around you not living up to the promise that was supposed to, right? Schools aren't protecting you the way they're supposed to, right? Healthcare is falling through. People aren't getting jobs. Your mom and dad are having issues, right? You see that institutions are broken. And then if you saw a Biden and a Kamala administration saying, everything's okay, don't worry, the institutions are fine, let's protect these institutions, then of course you're not going to resonate with that. Meanwhile, you had Trump, who was like, these institutions are broken, they're corrupt, only I can fix them, you're getting a raw deal, let me do that. And that's the thing that Democrats need to grapple with.
Yeah, that voice you're hearing is Deep Singh Badesha. He's a political strategist here in Colorado. You know, I'm interested in this coalition that's building because when I went to the Bernie rally, if you had just airdropped me into it, I would have been like, huh, John Tesh concert? Like it was like a lot of boomers bringing their little lawn chairs and then you had kind of the more socialist radical wing that was younger. But I've noticed among the older wing a frustration with the tearing down of these institutions that's taking place, right? They felt like they built something that's really good, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, that type of thing. And then you have Elon Musk with the chainsaw at CPAC, right? Not just slicing and dicing, but I'm going down to the bone and we're clearing stuff out. And so the boomers frustrated that this institutionalism has taken hold. And then you have the progressives that want kind of more of a fighting wing of the Democrat Party, on the nose, take it to them. And so that has pulled together. Talk to me about how the older generation, particularly here in Colorado, is dealing with this, because they're showing up at these anti-Trump rallies. I see them all the time. They're down there Saturday. I was down there. You do have a boomer generation that's showing up at these types of events.
You know, I feel like when you go to those Bernie Sanders rallies, when you go to those AOC rallies, and they're everywhere, right? It's not just Denver. Denver had 32,000 people. Then LA had almost 40,000 people. They went to Utah, Salt Lake City, and they had thousands of people. They went to...
By the way, I don't buy the idea that these are just all rented. Yeah. And I think that's a big mistake for conservatives to make. Like, oh, we track cell phones. And yeah, I'm sure there are some people that travel around and they're just kind of hanging out. But if you dismiss that that's like where the beating heart of the electorate is in Colorado right now, you're going to continue to lose elections.
Honestly, actually, again, going back to that 2008, 2009 moment, right? 2008, the American public really wrote Barack Obama a blank check, saying like, hey, you can kind of do whatever you want. You have all these senators, you have all these House reps. You ran on ending wars, you ran on, putting the bankers to task, doing better economics. And then he didn't do that. It's a huge backlash, huge rallies. And you saw the Tea Party actually seize on that, right? So I think that's the same kind of thing that's happening right now. So as far as like why the older folks might be jiving with this, I think there's two separate things. I think older folks also see that their kids are getting a raw deal. Right, I see that they see that for the first time ever, Americans are having kids, and their kids will have a worse life than they did, right? And I think older generations are protective about some of the things they did well, right? Social Security, Medicare expansion, and then we did have a lot of progress with youth, of course, towards LGBTQ rights. So I think there is a defense of that, but at the same time, I think folks saw in that generation what happened with manufacturing being in decline. They see that there's a lot of abundance around them, and it's not really happening to them, and I think that's what people are kind of rebelling against. And if this anger is not directed at who I think it should be directed towards, which is a small 1%, 0.01%, who controls all the wealth in like riches in America. If that's not aimed at who actually sold the American dream, and instead is aimed at immigrants and migrants and overseas actors, I think it's going to lead America to a bad place. And that's why Bernie Sanders has both he's offering a refuge for people's anger in many ways. AOC is doing that as well, but they're offering a better, more optimistic future, right? Donald Trump at the end of the day is saying, the world's a scarce place. It's a scary place. It's a dog-eat-dog world. It's either you or me, and, we got to fight for that. Bernie Sanders and AOC are saying there is enough to go around and there is enough to share as long as these 1% of oligarchs and billionaires aren't hoarding it.
That voice you're hearing is Deep Singh Badesha. He's a political strategist here in Colorado. Now, Deep, We're a Democrat state. We're blue through and through, right? There's not a single Republican elected statewide. Democrats have a near majority in the state House and state Senate. And Colorado has gotten more expensive, more crime-ridden. We're spending more money at the state capitol. I mean, it is kind of following the Bernie model, and things aren't going so well. What's your response, sir?
I actually don't think it's following a Bernie or a progressive model. I think it's following more of like a neoliberal model, right? Like the reason why we kind of got into this mess is actually more like the Clinton era Democrats and the kind of even the Obama era, Hillary Clinton era Democrats. Colorado is a blue state, but it's still a very moderate state. It's still maybe center left. And a lot of those center left policy positions, especially fiscal policy, can't solve the wider overarching issue. And there's a new book, Ezra Klein's book, Abundance. You probably have heard about it. A lot of folks have been talking about it. Is why is there a housing crisis in blue states and blue cities, right? That is something that we need to grapple with as liberals, as Democrats. We need to figure that out. Is why can't Democrats build a train in California?
Yeah, right. And he does a good job in the New York Times explaining this. Like when you point to like really blue cities, the government's not working for the people.
I think that's the interesting thing again, so the left and the right can come together. I think on the right you have Trump, you have J.D. Vance, and you have his whole crew saying like, hey, the traditional Republicans and the traditional Democrats have led this country into the situation it's in. Listen to me and we'll change it. And on the left, again, you have Bernie Sanders, AOC, Ro Khanna, these folks who are saying, look, the traditional Democrats and Republicans have got us into this mess. We need a new way. So on both kind of flanks, the traditional model is under attack.
That's Deep Singh Badesha. He's a political strategist here in Colorado. He's going to join us. Feel free to give us a call if you'd like to join the conversation, 303-696-1971, or text us on the Dan Caplis Law text line, 720-819-5115. People texting in, they saw you on the Caldera show, and they really liked your appearance there. So
that's good to know.
They're starting to track you. Well, we'll continue our conversation. You're listening to The Jeff and Bill Show.
This is Denver's talk leader, News Talk 710 KNUS.
Welcome back to the Jeff and Bill Show. Joining us live in studios, Deep Singh Badesha. He's a political strategist here in Colorado. A Democrat. We actually got one to hang out with us. Hey,
yes, we did.
They have all the power, and we just kind of stand in our corners.
Yeah,
and go, Boy,
we can
you talk to
we
us?
can count the number of Democrats that join the show on one hand and have fingers left over.
Adam Frisch came on. Adam was always good about it.
Ted Trempa, that's about it.
And part of Ted. Part of Deep's background is that he's from Colorado Springs, so he kind of grew up around conservatives. And like we were just sharing this offline, I grew up going to Cherry Creek High School, no bastion of conservatism either. But when you grow up around people, you just go, well, they just disagree. They have a different worldview. We can talk. That's why I go down to the rallies. I'm not intimidated to go talk to people in rallies. And Deep, thanks for being on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, happy to be here. Excited to be here.
So let's start talking Democrat primaries. I mean, that's really probably just going to control the state. I mean, it's going to take a while for things to turn around in Colorado for Republicans. So whoever wins the Democrat primary, at least odds are, is going to end up winning the general. Let's go governor, right? You've got Michael Bennet, Phil Weiser vying for that, maybe some other folks. Talk to us about how you guys are seeing that play out.
You know, it's interesting. Like coming into 2026, a lot of people were like very excited about the gubernatorial race in particular in Colorado. Because like, oh, we have a young bench, right? We have like Jason Crow, we have Brittany Pedersen, we have Joe Neguse, diverse folks. And at the state capitol level, we also had a lot of folks. We have like, you know, young mayors, really interesting bench. So folks were like, okay, it's going to be interesting. Now we're kind of left with Michael Bennet, who's been in Colorado politics for a very, very long time. He's probably been a U.S. Senator more than some voters will be voting for him, so that'll be interesting.
Well, and I think a lot of us are pointing out, all right, 20 years in public service and the success record, I don't know. You know?
Yeah, and I think some Democratic voters are going to be grappling with that. It'll be interesting. And then Phil Weiser, who's been a pretty successful attorney general for sure. And I think it's interesting is like, you know, there was a moment where it might have been Phil Weiser versus Joe Neguse or Phil Weiser versus Jenna versus Joe, right? Where I think Phil would have been actually seen as like the older white dude, moderate, more moderate. Now Phil's a young, vibrant, progressive star, right? So it's very interesting. And it's fascinating that Michael Bennet launched, and he launched with Jason Crow's endorsement, Mike Johnson's endorsement, Joe Neguse's endorsement, and a bunch of other state folks' endorsement. And that's because Bennett's been here for a long time. He's part of the one of the original waves that turned Colorado from red to purple to blue, right? Especially with alliances with Obama in that team. But what's unique about that is he's going to be, if he becomes governor, he's going to be the third ever senator to governor to win while he's a sitting senator who gets to appoint his replacement. So the last time that happened, that was in New Jersey and then Alaska. One appointed someone who ended up being corrupt, and the other appointed his daughter. So not a great track record for that. And I think this interesting thing that you're seeing form on the Democratic side is sort of a shadow campaign for that U.S. Senate seat.
Yeah.
Right? And it's going to be like Michael Bennet, I think, is like taking a look at like Jason Crow, maybe Joe Neguse, and Mike Johnson, who all have huge fundraising chops to be like, hey, who's going to raise the most money? And, you know, that's some jokes that folks have been saying in back rooms in the Democratic Party. So I think that's happening. But I think that might turn off Democratic voters, right? I mean, we've had this whole issue with vacancy elections at the local level already, right? But Democratic voters right now don't like anointment. Right, we tried an anointment in 2016 with Hillary Clinton. The state went for Bernie Sanders pretty heavily because folks don't like it when you're told who to vote for. And the Bennet campaign kind of feels like that right now, where it's like, hey, you know, Bennett's been along for a long time. He's been a senator. Let's make him governor, and then we can figure out the Senate. So I think the Phil Weiser versus Michael Bennet race is actually going to be quite progressive, and it's going to be this interesting thing. I think the lane might end up being where Phil Weiser's like, you know, I was an antitrust professor. You know, I took on corporations. I took on the Trump administration, right? I'm not afraid of suing oligarchs and billionaires. Like, you know, he helped sue the pharmaceutical folks that led to the opioid crisis, right? Meanwhile, Michael Bennet, he had the 5th most donations from billionaires when he ran for president. I'm not sure if you know this, but Michael Bennet ran for president in 2020.
Right. So did John.
Yeah. John Hickenlooper and Michael Bennet both ran.
I think Steve Bannon said, I can see your 2% coming right now to Jared Polis. Because, I mean, it is interesting how Colorado Democrats get to the national stage and then just hang around 2% in the polls.
Yeah, it's ever since Gary Hart, you know, it's like the curse of Gary Hart, essentially, right?
Your history's good, man.
What I was going to say, so here's the thing with Michael Bennet. So he ran this crowded Democratic primary in 2020. He had the 5th most donations from billionaires, right? It was like Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, Booker, Buttigieg, and then Michael Bennett, who had donations from 32 billionaires. And right now, I mean, you've gone to those Bernie Sanders rallies, you've gone to the Democratic rallies. There is not a lot of appetite right now for billionaires in the party, especially conservative billionaires who might be donating to Bennett. So I think if Phil Weiser can kind of tap into that populist base, being like, I'm the antitrust guy. I'm the guy who's going to go after corporations. I'm the guy who's going to go after monopolies and the billionaires, the millionaires, and this guy has the donations. I think there is a lane there. A lot of folks are saying it's not going to be a competitive thing, that, you know, Bennett has all this name recognition. He's going to have a ton of money. But we'll see how this shakes out.
I guess my question to you, Deep Singh Badesha, who's in the studio here, look, you end up with these competitive primaries, but at the end of the day, it seems like there's a mold. And the mold is a white old dude in jeans becomes the leader, whether you're Mike Johnston, who's a little bit younger, but Jared Polis, Phil Weiser, Michael Bennett, John Hickenlooper,
Bill Owens.
Bill.
I mean, keep going. Yeah,
Bill Ritter.
Yes, exactly. Bill Ritter. Yes, all of them.
Where is the diversity in the Democrat Party at the end of the day when it comes to the actual person taking office?
You know, I think, again, there's a lot of appetite. And the thing is, at the end of the day, I think the governor's race is going to be pretty milquetoast. The attorney general's race might spice up. Right now, your show's favorite person, Jenna Griswold, is running for attorney general.
Next to only Kyle Clark. By the way.
Yes.
But yes.
So Jenna Griswold is running against Michael Dougherty and Crisanta Duran. Two progressives right now are considering jumping in. One's going to be a progressive with a lot of left union backing. National Democrats might come into that. So it'll be a very interesting reckoning where, you know, I think Jenna's might be, you know, I think a lot of people think she's going to be a shoo-in for that, but I think it's going to be a competitive primary. But the most interesting thing, and this might be a little bit of a sneak peek, is progressives, especially a lot of young, diverse progressives, are taking a look at Hickenlooper's seat. And everybody's like, you know, John Hickenlooper's unbeatable. You know, he was mayor, and then he was governor, and then he was Senate. And when he jumped to the Senate race, everyone jumped out, right? Except Andrew Romanoff. So Andrew Romanoff just, you know. But... Yeah. Andrew Romanoff lost against both Bennett and Hickenlooper, so it's a unique thing. But I was going to say, so when it came to, you know, Hickenlooper has one of the most conservative voting records in national politics. He has a more conservative voting record in the Senate than the two senators from Arizona. Arizona is actually a purple state. Yeah. And the two senators from Georgia. As you were saying, Colorado is sapphire blue. You know, we're between New York and Illinois. And Hickenlooper is voting, though, like he's a member of like a +1 Republican state. And that does leave him vulnerable. Another thing that leaves him vulnerable is that he's 74 years old. At the end of his term, he'll be 80 years old. And I think, you know, like Democrats both nationally and locally are kicking the tires in that race to be like, if we can find a young person for this race. And that'll be the top of the ticket, actually. So the top of the ticket in the Democratic primary won't be the governor. It'll be the U.S. Senate race, right? That's where all the caucus will go to. So that's something that's happening. You probably saw that David Hogg, DNC vice chair, is going around with a lot of money. He's going around testing it. So I think that Hickenlooper race might be something that keep an eye on.
Wow. That's Deep Singh Badesha is joining us here live in studio. We'll continue our conversation with a Democrat political strategist. You're listening to The Jeff and Bill Show.
This is Denver's Talk Leader, News Talk 710 KNUS.
Welcome back to the Jeff and Bill Show. Joining us live in studio, Deep Singh Badisha, political strategist, Democrat political strategist here in Colorado. Now, we were talking about how the Attorney General and Governor and Senate race may show up here, and how some of the Democrat voting base is getting more progressive. But I want to ask you about Tim Hernandez and Elizabeth Epps, because it seems like you can get a little too progressive, and then the party bosses, like Republicans, will always fight in public, right? We go out there and you're not conservative enough, and all of our dirty laundry's aired publicly, hence the last state party chair fight that took place. But it seems like on the Democrat side, they have their differences, and then all of a sudden you lose your primaries. Can you be too progressive in Colorado?
Yeah, I think that, Tim Hernandez, Elizabeth Epps, good friends of mine, really love them, helped out both campaigns, helped out Elizabeth Epps on her first campaign when it was a really big upset against the first person she ran for. I think Elizabeth's interesting is that she went to the state house. She is someone who was a grassroots activist, someone who was protesting in the streets. When the Black Lives Matter protesters got assaulted by the police and they sued the city and county of Denver, she was the named plaintiff. Right, that was bought by those attorneys, and so she's always used to that. And I think for Elizabeth, it was like, let me see what happens inside the dome. I've been outside the dome. Let me go inside and take a look. I think she went in, took a look, and said, "Wow, a lot of people are violating CORA over here. Or a lot of people are violating Open Meetings Act." So her and Bob Marshall, so the farthest left person and the most moderate person, brought that lawsuit against the Democrats, if you remember. I think she took a look and she's like, you know what? I'm better suited outside this building, right? I'm better suited as an activist, better suited at the Freedom Fund, freeing people from jail, freeing people from prison. So I think that's what she took a look at, and I think she's still doing amazing work. When it came to the Tim Hernandez race, right, that was a hard-fought race, and he did lose by a couple hundred votes. That race was pretty unique in some circumstances where, it was almost a canary in the coal mine that we were not going to have a big turnout in 2024. So in November, this was an election that happened June of 2024. The Democratic primary was Tim Hernandez versus Cecilia Espinoza. If there were less voters in June of 2024 than there were in June of 2020. In June of 2024, again, election year, Trump's going to be in the ballot, competitive, all that. But no one really turned out. So it was a very low turnout. I think if Tim had seen the same numbers and the same demographics of voters in 2020, he would have held on to that seat. But I think progressive still won, across the race. Javier Mabry kept his seat easily. Lorena Garcia kept her seat easily. You had Yarazoki beat a ton of dark money up in Fort Collins. So across the state, I think the state house and the state Senate candidates still did end up winning. I don't think Tim's done with politics. I think Tim is one of our shining stars. He's only 27 years old, so still a young guy. He's probably going to come back, run for something else. I hope he does run for something else. So we'll see then, in a different kind of atmosphere, how he does.
Oh, that's Deep Singh Badesha. He's a Democrat political strategist joining us live in studio. We'll carry him over for a few minutes in the 9 o'clock hour. Yes, we have a Democrat on 710 KNUS. You're listening to Jeff and Bill.
And we're not letting him leave. This is 710 KNUS.
It is 9 a.m. in the Mile High City on this Wednesday. Is it Wednesday? I think it's Wednesday, April 23rd, 2025. Who knows? I got 4 kids in school. We're out late every night. You're listening to the Jeff and Bill Show, News Talk 710 KNUS. I'm your co-host, Jeff Hunt, along with Bill Thorpe, bringing you the freshest insights and hottest takes from the right, left, and center. And we actually have the left in studio. They're coming to hang out with us. Deep Singh Badesha is joining us. He's a Democrat political strategist live in studio. Text message is very positive. Great guest, level-headed, common sense. They appreciate you reasoning through these issues with us. So thank you, brother.
That's great.
Let's talk about how people can connect with you. So on X, learn more about you. Deep, not shallow. Right?
Yeah, the artist formerly known as Twitter. I still refer to it as Twitter. No matter what Elon Musk does in both X or Doge, gotta call it Twitter. Yeah, deep, not shallow. So DEEPNOT shallow.
Deep, not shallow. All right.
You also can go to deepnotshallow.com, trying to start more Substack stuff.
Nice.
Where I was previewing the Democratic Party races. I actually had the scoop on the Michael Bennet thing, so you can go back. I wrote in January that Michael Bennet was going to maybe hop into the governor's race. I actually got a text message from one of Bennett's staffers in D.C. He's like, no way. I was like, bro, just keep watching. And that staffer later texted me like, yeah, you were right.
Well, what I appreciate, and I think our listeners have appreciated too, is a good conversation about all this. Because when I go down to these rallies, right, and they have their little signs like, Trump's not a king. And I'm like, okay, well, what is he doing that makes him a king? Everything. Anything in particular? All of it. Okay. And it makes for really fun videos on the conservative side. But your willingness to come in and have a conversation, I really appreciate it. I do want to ask you this, though. I grew up in Colorado. You grew up in Colorado. This is a different state than when I grew up in. It is getting more and more progressive in its worldview. But to me, it seems like things aren't working in some capacities. And I've asked my other Democrat friends this too. Like, we look at crime. We look at the funding that's now going into the state capitol. $43.9 billion budget just passed. We're spending more money than we've ever spent before. And it just doesn't seem like some of these policy programs are working. Is there a time where you guys take a step back and go, we have all the power, we have all the control, maybe we need to adjust our policies a little bit here? Or is it we just need to be more progressive? If we just took more money from people in the form of taxes and got more progressive in our policies, then things would work. Help me understand the self-reflection that takes place in a state where you have total control.
Yeah, the thing is that the Democratic Party at the end of the day is still pretty divided, both nationally and locally, right? I think one of the biggest fights you can see is between, the Democrats that are looking after like blue-collar jobs, working-class jobs, and the middle class, versus Democrats who are more traditionally fond of protecting business as usual, right? And that's the thing. Like, when Biden and Kamala ran, business as usual. I think when Bennett's kind of running for governor, he's trying to change tax, but it's going to feel like business as usual, right? And then there's a new flank of the Democratic Party that said business as usual is not working, right? For the last 20 years, we've seen how business as usual is working. It's leading to more cost of living, higher rents, houses you can't afford, streets that aren't working. All these things are breaking, right? So we need a new way forward. So there is that schism happening. I come from a branch of the Democratic Party, right? The left branch, the progressive branch. That wave of the Democratic Party is in what's happening to workers, what's happening to the middle class that we can do better. And one of the things you can look at is that the fights that's happening around unionization, right? You probably heard about the Labor Peace Act, right? That it takes 2 votes in Colorado to make a union, right? There is a big fight happening in the Capitol where Democrats will pass this probably out, and the governor will probably veto it, right? That's one of the things that, unionization, when people, whether it's Trump or it's Democrats, look back on a storied age of America, right? When America had an industrial base and everyone had a good job. You can bring all those jobs back, but if those jobs don't have union protections, if they don't have union pensions, if they don't have weekends off and overtime pay and all these things, they're not going to be great jobs, right? And I think that's what Democrats have not been focusing on in the last couple of years, whether it's blue states, blue cities, is what does it look like to have a meaningful job? What does it have to have a job that both gives you dignity, that is productive, but that also, lets you afford to live in this state?
That's Deep Singh Badesha. political strategist, joining us live in studio. Thank you again for a great conversation.
Yes, thank
you for coming down and being willing to hang out with us. I know we'll get some text messages wondering why you did this, why we would have a Democrat on.
And we'll get others wanting to know when he can come back.
Right.
So, yeah,
and,
it'll be nice.
Most importantly, and I think you'll probably get some heat from your side, too, going, why were you on the Jeff and Bill show? You know how crazy right-wing Jeff is. But the fact that we get to have this in-depth conversation, I really appreciate it, brother. Thank you for coming across the barrier.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. I think one of the things is that at the end of the day, like, we have to get through this together, right? Like, people are in pain. You know, the right feels like they have a raw deal. And when Trump says it's for one thing, they go that way. When Democrats don't recognize that pain, it's not that. One of the things is going on these shows, whether it's like, going on radio programs or podcasts across the aisle. I think it's really important. Thanks for having me. I think a lot of actually Republican shows wouldn't have a Democrat, so glad to be here.
Deep Singh Badesh. Follow him on X at Deep Not Shallow, DEEP. NOT Shallow, SHALLOW, Deep Not Shallow. This guy, I can identify talent. This guy's going places. You're listening to the Jeff and Bill Show. We're going to get to news with Blake Olson.
Blake Olson.
Blake Olson, news and comment.
48 and sunny in Denver, expecting a high of 68 today. The 7-10 5-day forecast coming up. Our top story, J.D. Vance, with the latest this morning on the endless war between Ukraine and Russia and Europe influencing this disaster.
We've issued a very explicit proposal to both the Russians and the Ukrainians, and it's time for them to either say yes or for the United States to walk away from this process. We've engaged in an extraordinary amount of diplomacy, of on-the-ground work. We've really tried to understand things from the perspective of both the Ukrainians and the Russians. What do Ukrainians care the most about? What do the Russians care the most about? And I think that we've put together a very fair proposal. We're going to see if the Europeans, the Russians, and the Ukrainians are ultimately able to get this thing over the finish line. Again, I feel pretty optimistic about it.
Bottom line, DJT and Vance want them to stop the killing or we're out. Stocks are sharply higher for a second day in a row. It comes as investors hope the U.S. and China trade tensions may calm soon. And DJT said he has no plans to remove Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell from his position. The Dow, the industrial average, has been up over 1,000 points, while the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ have been up over 3%. DJT says that he's confident China will come to the bargaining table with the tariffs. Kevin Hassett, director of National Economic Council, the National Economic Council, on Stegall this morning, and he says we have a great example already on how this will happen.
And I think that if you're looking for something to really feel buoyant about, to celebrate, think about it this way. It's probably the case that historically, the country that had the least beneficial trade policy towards the U.S. on earth was India. They had trade barriers. You can't buy this, you can't buy that. They had 85% tariffs on motorcycles, on Harley Davidsons. I mean, they were wrong in almost every direction. And to think about it, that they're the first ones coming to the table, that's a sign of the power of President Trump's strategy.
Hope so. Will Colorado ever have the election integrity that Wyoming has? We pray. The Secretary of State from WYO, Chuck Gray, was on with the fellas this morning.
We saw fully exposed all the weaknesses in our election process in 2020. And these measures that were brought through state by state in the intervening period from 2020 to 2024 have been pivotal. And we're going to continue to bring through those strengthening measures post-2024 election. And President Trump has talked about this when he signed that first executive order here about 3 weeks ago on election integrity. He said more are coming, and this is so important that we continue to strengthen elections.
The public is lining up to pay their respects to Pope Francis. His body is lying in state at St. Peter's Basilica for 3 days of public viewing. The Democrats' new crazy star, Jazzy Jazz, Jasmine Crockett, on the late night circuit with a former comedian.
I actually wanted to be an anesthesiologist. So I've always been really good at math and science, but I didn't want to talk to people.
You wanted to put people to sleep, and you kind of are doing the opposite thing now.
Yes, I want them to be woke now.
Yeah, she actually told the truth there. She definitely wants everyone to be woke, and those who are paying her want her to push the woke as much as possible, and she's doing a great job doing that. Kroenke Sports, which owns Ball Arena, is making plans to redevelop the area around the venue. They submitted its concept plan for the first phase of the development earlier this week. The project will include 13-story hotel, 2 residential buildings, and a 5,000-seat performance venue. The Denver City Council approved rezoning for the area around the project site earlier this month. At the arena tonight, Game 3, Avs and Stars, Stanley Cup playoffs at 7:30. They drop the puck, and Nuggets fans, Game 3 is tomorrow with the Clippers in Southern California. 46 in Westminster, 47 in Lakewood, 48 in Denver. Jeff and Billy continue on Hump Day.
It was proven to be connected to the internet.
No,
Billy.
Joe. No, it wasn't. They
Yes,
weren't
it
approved.
was.
Here in Colorado?
Well, then
Wait,
get
Joe.
the national
Here in Colorado?
director of-
Hang on, Joe.
Yes, electricity again this morning with Joe and Billy. Love it. Blake Olson, News Talk 710 KNUS.
Some developing upslope will bring some changing weather to the Front Range in the days ahead. Temperatures will be slightly cooler, and chances of showers and thunderstorms will be going up. Highs today mid to upper 60s with scattered showers and thunderstorms this afternoon and tonight. Lows 40s. Highs will be 60s Thursday and near 60 Friday with scattered afternoon showers and thunderstorms possible both days. Weather sponsored by Colorado's Best Roofing, reminding you to protect your home from the harsh Colorado weather and schedule your free, no-obligation roof inspection today at roofingcolorado.com. That's roofingcolorado.com. Meteorologist Don Day in the 710 KNUS Weather Center.
Well, it's often said that the Jeff and Bill show is a Titanic heading for an iceberg.
Yes, and unfortunately, I'm the one driving. You're like, you're going to crash.
Iceberg, dead ahead.
Give the wheel to Jeff, for God's sakes, before you ruin this entire ship. Yes.
Well, there's an actual real-life Titanic exhibit coming here to the Denver area, and we have a really interesting connection. And I kind of went down a rabbit hole at one point in my life with the whole Baby Doe Tabor, Horace Tabor, Leadville, Molly Brown, all that stuff. And Molly Brown was on the Titanic, survived the sinking of it. And you saw her portrayed in the movie Titanic by, what was her name?
Kathy Bates.
Kathy Bates.
Yep.
Did a great job, right? And she was always known as this kind of fun Western, new money type of person, right? So joining us to give us a preview of this Titanic exhibit coming to Colorado is John Zaller. John, thanks so much for joining the Jeff and Bill show.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, give us some insight, our listeners, on what they could experience at this new exhibit coming to the Denver area.
Sure. Titanic: An Immersive Voyage is a 20,000 square foot exhibition that takes you back into the Titanic story and tells it in a whole new way. So using all of those elements of storytelling that you mentioned, we're all so familiar with the Titanic. We also have more than 200 artifacts on display here, room recreations that place you in certain parts of the ship at certain times. But we also use immersive technology to place you on the bridge as those ice warnings are coming in the crow's nests, trying to spot the iceberg before it's too late, in the boiler rooms as the iceberg breaches the hull, in a lifeboat as Titanic is taking its final plunge, and finally, using virtual reality, we take you to the wreck site where you can see the wreck of Titanic better than you could see it if you actually dove to it in a submersible. So we want to use that great story of Titanic, that tragic story of Titanic, but tell it to you in new, using the new technology that we've been so good at using over the years.
You're listening to John Zaller, executive producer of Titanic, an immersive voyage that is coming to the Denver area. This one is going to be absolutely fantastic because it's if you ever wanted to pretend that you were Leo or Kate, you can actually feel like you're inside of the movie. In fact, Mr. Zaller, I've seen in other cities, you've had the whole part of the ship where you can create "I'm the king of the world" scene. Is that correct? That you've got kind of the bow of the ship where people can take pictures?
That's right. So at the front, at the very beginning of the exhibit, we start the story in a little different way. We show you all the popular culture references to Titanic that have been sort of used over the years. So all the books, all the movies, props from the movies, props from different films, but also we have that shot where you're the king of the world. We recreated the bow of the ship with a nice prop of the entire ship behind you. Get right up there and do your own photo op. And it's a really great way to start because it's very lighthearted, this part of the Titanic story, but it's a very serious story. And so in that same area, we say, okay, everybody's fascinated with Titanic. You're fascinated with Titanic, but why is that? What brings you here today? And then throughout the voyage that you go on, you're able to see different parts of the ship, explore the story in a different way, and maybe come to that conclusion near the end where you could say, okay, I have a better understanding of why Titanic is so important to me.
That voice is John Zaller. He is the executive producer of Titanic, an immersive voyage that is going to be showing at the Exhibition Hub at the Art Center, Denver. That's down at 3800 Elati Street, downtown. So you can grab tickets right now. And again, if you've seen the movies, you've possibly read books, you've talked to friends about it, but this is bringing you inside. This is going to immerse you and make you feel like you are one of the passengers. In fact, I understand, Mr. Zaller, that you start out with even getting a passenger card, someone that was traveling on the Titanic at that time. Can you talk about how that passenger card is the gateway for someone that is listening right now to actually experience Titanic in a new and different way than they have before?
That's right. So everybody gets a boarding pass when they first enter the experience. And that's the name of an actual passenger who's on board the ship or a crew member. So we have hundreds of these that we've written out. There's a little bit of the story as well, where you're from, how old you are, what brought you on board the ship. And I say you because as you go through the experience, you really start to say, okay, I'm in third class, so what was third class like on board the ship? I'm in first class, whoa, what was first class like? And it's really fun when you get a couple and one of them's in first class and one of them's in third class. They're elbowing each other throughout the experience. But what really brings it home is in the final gallery, the memorial gallery. You can check the memorial wall to see whether your passenger survived or was lost in the sinking. And that's a really powerful moment for people because it brings home the reality of this tragic event in a way that you wouldn't have expected. Suddenly, all that history, all that storytelling, all of that technology comes to this very real moment of my passenger lived or died in this tragedy. And you start to think about them and their lives and those that they left behind and what their hopes and dreams were. And it's a very powerful moment of reflection, a very powerful moment to take stock of your own life.
You know, John Zaller, executive producer of Titanic, an immersive voyage that is at the Exhibition Hub at the Art Center, Denver right now. I thought that whole boarding pass was a really unique idea because, again, Jeff and I both have 4 kids, and the idea of taking our kids there and all of them getting a boarding pass, and of course, at the end, the kids are going to tease each other about who survived and who didn't, but it's going to be a touchstone. It's going to be something that is memorable because you have taken the journey along with the person on your boarding pass as you navigate through the story of Titanic, and you're experiencing it as if they would because, you do see the grand dining room. You guys have recreated the grand staircase. You see some of the wonderful parties that are going on, and then tragedy strikes, and you have done a wonderful, and again, it's immersive when these things are like VR without the VR headsets. It's ginormous screens and wonderful sets, and even recreating an actual lifeboat, the right size, right dimensions of what would be on the Titanic. So you do walk through the steps of the passengers that are there, and you're sharing the journey with the person on your boarding pass, and then at the end, you decide and you see, did they survive or did they not? But again, that's a moment in which it allows you to take that memory and that journey with you beyond the experience of just inside the museum. I think it's a really interesting way to bring someone into the story of Titanic that I haven't seen or experienced some way before.
Well, thanks for that. And really, it's, we have all this incredible technology, which really does help aid the storytelling. But the story itself is so powerful. When you think about it, something as low tech as this boarding pass, and also at the end of the experience in that memorial room, we actually ask guests to write out on a Marconigram a message to their passenger, to that passenger that they were traveling with. And they leave those Marconigrams up on the wall as we leave the exhibit, and you read the most touching and powerful messages from people who 90 minutes before had just stepped on board the Titanic, but had gone through this entire journey and now have this new perspective, and this new perspective sometimes on their own lives and their loved ones and those around them. So it's a great experience, both from just an entertainment standpoint, but also for education and that ability to reflect where you are in your own life. Another thing that's really amazing in this story is people often say, what would I have done had I been on the boat deck? Had I been given the choice to get into a lifeboat or let a family go into the lifeboat ahead of me? How would I have reacted in those final moments? We do, for example, have some sheet music from the band leader, Wallace Hartley, that was recovered from his body. And Wallace Hartley famously played as the ship was going down. He was one of the original heroes of Titanic, and he's someone that we feature in the exhibition. But there's so many stories like that throughout the experience that you can uncover as you go through it.
Now, it's John Zauler, executive producer of Titanic, an Immersive Voyage, going on at the Exhibition Hub at Art Center Denver. That's 3800 Elati Street. You can grab tickets online. Just search for Titanic, an Immersive Experience, and then choose the Denver location. Best way to reserve your trip on this ship. Now, Mr. Zauler, everybody's journey with Titanic starts somewhere. For you to get involved as being the executive producer of Titanic, where did your journey with the boat start? Why create this experience? What was the idea? What was the germ of thought?
So I've been involved in creating Titanic exhibits for 25 years, and I've done hundreds of openings of Titanic exhibitions and created dozens of Titanic experiences. When this new opportunity came to me, I put together a collection of 3 collectors who have collectively we've got about 2,000 collection. And I wanted to tell the story in a different way than I had done before. And the goal really was to connect you emotionally to the story like never before. And for me, what it started with was the question, what were Titanic's final words? And that's something that really hasn't been asked. There hasn't been a lot of thought around the Titanic's wireless messages that she was sending out at those final moments. So we went back and studied that transcript of Titanic's wireless messages. And using that, we created this immersive experience, which is about 12 minutes long. You're sitting in a lifeboat that's, as you mentioned, the full size of the ship, of the lifeboats, a full-size replica of the lifeboats. And you're watching Titanic go down by the head as her wireless messages appear on screen. You hear them over the audio, but then you see them transliterated on screen with the other messages that were coming in from other ships in the area. And that's the genesis of the entire creation of Titanic, an Immersive Voyage. And from there, we spread out the story. We said, okay, how do we broaden the lens on this so that you're not just sitting in this lifeboat? How did we get here, and what happened after? So we tell the story of Titanic's construction, the construction of her sister ships, Olympic and Britannic. We also tell the story of the rescue of the passengers from the Carpathia. We have artifacts from the Carpathia. We tell the story of the additional recovery efforts made by the Minia and the Mackay Bennett. So we have artifacts from those ships as well. So we've really tried to do our best to broaden the lens here to make this story as comprehensive as possible. And I do have quite a few Titanic enthusiasts who've been to the exhibit. They tell me it's the best one they've seen, and some of them tell me it's the best exhibit they've seen. So it's a real feather in the cap for the entire team that was part of creating Titanic, an Immersive Voyage.
Yeah, I would say, like, to parents or even someone that has a significant other and they're not really a history buff or something, this is a way to get them engaged that I've never seen before. Now, Mr. Zoller, executive producer of Titanic: An Immersive Voyage, you talked about the number of exhibits and things you've been involved with Titanic. Why? How did Titanic take a hold of a young John or a John in his formative years? What was it about Titanic that has grabbed you, held on to you, and you've done so many exhibits? What's the reason? I just want to know where that curiosity started.
Well, for me, so I was always a fan, fascinated with the Greek and Roman myths, especially the Greek tragedies. And Titanic is the Greek tragedy of our modern era. It's a story that no matter how many times you come back to it, there's always a new lesson to learn. And it's a story that as you get older, there's different lessons to learn. So you can learn something about Titanic when you're a kid, and we do see a lot of fascination with kids who, it seems like it's dinosaurs and then it's Titanic. There's so many facts around Titanic that you can learn when you're young. But then as you get older, you get into your formative years, you get into your 20s and 30s, there are other stories on board the ship. There are love stories on the Titanic, and there's stories of heroism, there's stories of bravery, there's stories of how the ship was built, how the ship was managed, that take you, really grab you at different ways depending on where you are in your life. And then there's that big lesson or that big moment of the overconfidence of humanity in the face of nature that is dealt this incredible lesson of humility by the hand of fate. And that's really what sums up that Titanic story in a way that continues to fascinate us and still feels a little unreal because of the way it's written out in actual time, that there was this unsinkable ship that was sailing on the North Atlantic with a captain who was the most familiar person with the North Atlantic, that struck an iceberg in the middle of the night, while the Californian was within 20 miles of it and could have saved everybody on board, but didn't hear the messages properly, and then leading to the loss of 1,500 people and only 700 surviving. Those 700 not knowing if they were going to make it through the night because of how cold it was, and the Carpathia coming across the horizon like a Deus Ex Machina to save those people who were in the lifeboats. So just that little context in and of itself is a fascinating story that can be unpacked forever. But then all of the stories inside of Titanic continue to reveal themselves and teach us more at wherever we find ourselves in our lives at any time.
That's John Zoller, executive producer of Titanic, an immersive voyage that's now where you can purchase tickets if you go to expo-titanic.com. That's expo-titanic.com. And then click on Denver and get tickets for this really immersive experience taking place here in Denver, Colorado. Now, I connected to Denver with Molly Brown. Help our listeners understand who the unsinkable Molly Brown was.
So Molly Brown is, in a lot of ways, she is the Titanic story. I mean, she certainly is in Denver, but she really is this incredible symbol of the resilience of the Titanic passengers. She was born in Missouri, moved to Leadville, made her own way there, and was working when she met J.J. Brown. He was a ambitious miner who thought that there was something else in those silver mines that had been closed down. He had a sense that there was gold in there. He got some funding. Turned out he was right, and Molly and JJ suddenly were incredibly wealthy, very wealthy. Molly had always been somebody who supported those less fortunate, those in need, supported the arts, was a big advocate for women's rights as well. And so with her newfound wealth, she continued to build on that spirit that she had of helping those less fortunate. She also did enjoy the riches that they benefited from, so they did a lot of traveling. And Molly was traveling around Europe when she heard the Titanic was setting sail from Cherbourg. She changed her plans to travel on Titanic back to the U.S. and while on board the ship, enjoyed all the luxuries that were affordable to those in first class, and those were many. Titanic was really considered to be better than the finest hotels in Europe in terms of first-class lodging and amenities and offerings. But on that night, April 14th, 1912, which we celebrated and honored just a few days ago, Molly Brown got in a lifeboat and was really the person who kept the spirits up on board the lifeboat that night in her lifeboat. She was making sure that everybody was rowing at different times to stay warm. She actually at one point insisted that they go back to rescue some passengers that were in the water. That she was overruled because everybody was terrified that those in the water would end up swamping the lifeboat if it came in anywhere near them. And following that, after the recovery onto Carpathia, by the time that the Carpathia 3 days later got to New York, Molly had already raised $10,000 for a Titanic Victims Fund, and that fund continued to grow. But that again was her efforts to help those who were less fortunate, because there were hundreds of people on board that ship who were newly widowed, who were traveling with their husbands or their sons or their families to come to the United States with basically nothing but the hope that their family would be able to create some income for them to then make it in America. Now they have nothing. And we do in the exhibit feature a deck chair from the Carpathia, which is a very powerful moment when you see that widow's chair, as we call it, that so many widows would have sat in. But Molly then went on to great fame. There was a Broadway show made about her. She became known as the unsinkable Molly Brown, and she used that fame to further her other causes for women's rights, the women's right to vote, helping those less fortunate. And that's something that she continued with for her whole life. And she donated to many causes, including helping to build the Immaculate Conception Cathedral in downtown Denver.
That's John Zaller, the executive producer of Titanic: An Immersive Voyage. Final question for you this morning, Mr. Zaller. Okay, you've set up the exhibit. What is the part of the exhibit that you keep coming back to? The part that is, I hate to say your favorite, but the part that you feel most impactful. I want to know, when our audience is walking through Titanic: An Immersive Voyage, what is the part that resonates the most with you? What do you keep coming back to?
Well, aside from all of it, I would say that for me the most powerful moment is sitting in that lifeboat in the immersive room, listening to Titanic's wireless messages go out and knowing that there's nothing you can do to stop what's about to happen. And that for me is a very powerful moment where you're as close to those passengers as you ever can be. That boarding pass you're holding in your hand, you're as close to that passenger as you ever can be, because they experienced something very similar on that night of April 14th, 1912. I'm going to also add that, for me, another powerful moment tied with that is when you do the virtual reality experience and you dive to the wreck of the Titanic, you see the ship, the bow section of the wreck, as though you're actually there. And that is so powerful, because the Titanic sits at the bottom of the ocean 2.5 miles beneath the surface in completely inhospitable conditions, that you could never stand there on an open ocean platform and look out over the wreck site. And it sits there as this last silent witness to the tragedy. And the treatment of that exploration of the bow section of the ship and then entering the ship through the magic of virtual reality is done so well that it brings me to tears almost every time I do it. So it's just such a powerful moment. And I think it's just such a connection to the ship in both of those moments. It's sinking by the head and then being able to visit the wreck site. Those are the two big takeaways for me.
Well, you don't have to pay a billionaire with his Game Boy Game Stick controller to take you down to the bottom of the Titanic, because we all know how that turned out. That's John Zaller, executive producer of Titanic: An Immersive Voyage. You can get tickets. It's coming here to Denver. Go to expo-titanic.com, expo-titanic.com. Great thing. This is one of those few things where it transcends all generations, right?
Yeah.
Grandparents, yourself and the kids, all go, all enjoy a time together. John Zeller, thank you so much for taking time to join the Jeff and Bill Show.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, guys. Really enjoyed it.
Hey, folks, I want to talk to you about the Colorado Farm Bureau. Whether it pulled out your skis or snowmobiles this last winter, it was a great year for winter fun, but the snow means even more to Colorado ag. And I want you to know that our state's farmers and ranchers are doing their part to protect our future water resources. The people of Colorado agriculture always have conservation, efficiency, and reuse top of mind when it comes to water use. As the metro area continues to grow, the Colorado Farm Bureau leads talks with state policymakers about preserving water for all areas of the state as pressure on the water system grows. It's going to take all of us to find a solution. My friends at the Colorado Farm Bureau are leaders in water conservation and water policy. They understand how to balance water for crops and water for families, and they're doing more with less. You can do your part. I recommend you join and become a member today. Go to coloradofarmbureau.com. That's coloradofarmbureau.com to join the great people there. We'll continue. Pete Boyles is joining us live in studio next. You're listening to The Jeff and Bill Show.
This is Denver's Talk Leader. We are News Talk 710 KNUS.
Welcome back to the Jeff and Bill Show, live in studio. The man, the myth, the legend, Peter Boyle is going to preview what Saturday is all about, brother.
Yeah, thanks for letting me do this. There's a new book on the market that I sprung on it. It's called Wise Guys in the White House. Gangsters, presidents, and the deals that they've made. You and I were talking about this.
Classic Peter Boyle's radio.
Great stuff,
right there.
and it starts really U.S. Grant and his brother and a gold deal, and these gold bugs got involved with the Grants. But the stuff that we know is Lucky Luciano working for Franklin Roosevelt in the Second World War, LBJ and the FBI and Reagan, but the Kennedys and organized crime. And, of course, I didn't know this one, and it doesn't come as a big shock, but Frank Sheeran, the labor union official and enforcer for Jimmy Hoffa and Russell Buffalino, was good friends with Joe Biden. I didn't know that. Reagan, of course, with Lou Wasserman, and you can't get around Donald Trump's blatant ties to construction and the gambling cartels when he built the Taj Mahal.
Yeah. I mean, you got to be a little bit of a gangster to get to that level. I mean, wait, is Jimmy Carter the only one that...
You know, you would want. That's a great question. But remember, what was that guy's name that got Jimmy Carter in trouble?
Well, his brother.
We worked with his brother. Bob Lee and I worked with. I think right around the time with your dad, and we fronted Billy Carter, who was the most mild-mannered guy in the world till he said, "Do you boys have anything to drink?"
And then it opened up.
I
mean, even the Bush is a little bit of a gangster there.
Prescott Bush.
Right.
Yeah.
Romney, Bain Capital, just kind of a different form of gangsterism.
But it's interesting to see these guys, directly connected. I knew about FDR and Lucky Luciano and the Second World War and the docks and the piers, and he kept it clean. And then he used Lucky. When they invaded Sicily and Italy, they used the organized crime guys there too. So American CIA did that, which doesn't shock you because of what the American CIA will do later. Yeah. So no, it's a wonderful book.
And are you just going to discuss the book? Do you have the author on? Or
he's on.
The author?
Yeah,
he's going to be
coming on. I finished his book. His name is Eric, and it's DeZeno. And what a great title. Wise Guys in the White House, Gangsters, Presidents, and the Deals That They Made.
Wow, that'll be fascinating.
Yeah, he's great.
That is must listen to. In fact, you had a great turnout for last week.
Oh.
All this is at 710knus.com. You can download the podcast, watch it on YouTube there. Show 9 to 1 on Saturdays.
And I, for the first time in a long time, re-watched. I don't usually listen to myself or watch again, but I did watch that Saturday show because of the people that were here talking about Oklahoma City, and they were magnificent. I mean, the people.
You still got it, Pete. You always bring in the best.
Well, this guy ought to be something.
Yeah, this will be a real great
Jeff.
show. 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. this Saturday. Peter Boyles. Don't miss it all at 710knus.com. You're listening to Jeff and Bill.
This is Denver's talk leader, News Talk 710 KNUS. Welcome back to the Jeff and Bill Show. Boy, has it been busy. A lot of fun to be had today. Really cool conversations. I think one of the highlights, Deep Singh Badisha, political strategist, progressive on the show. Yes, we got another Democrat on the show. That's crazy. We thought that.
Wait, another Democrat?
I know.
What?
I
Bill,
know.
are you
It's crazy.
admitting?
No, Ted
I don't
Trimpa.
know.
Ted Trimpa.
Oh, Ted Trimpa.
Yeah, we got more. Yes.
I thought Bill was finally admitting.
No, I'm not. No, never been a part of that party. Never will be. No, not if I can help it.
I just
not
love it. We always get you close to the line.
I know.
And you're like, no, I'm not one of them.
It is. I know. It's so close. It's a dance that we do. And speaking of that, there's a dance that you do in your personal life with your health. And I want to talk to you about Wound Care Associates of Colorado. It's really important to me because they are helping out someone in my family right now. And I wish someone in my family had opportunity to work with Wound Care Associates of Colorado years ago because of some negative health consequences. Let me tell you about them. Okay, they deal with those chronic, slow-healing cuts, diabetic ulcers, pressure sores. Doesn't seem like a really big deal. You're like, you got a small cut. How big of a deal is it? Well, it can be a very big deal because that torn skin and tissue is the perfect place for the dirt, germs, and bacteria to get access to your body. Most places dealing with a chronic wound that's a slow-healing cut will basically just try to maintain it. We'll keep it clean and hope nothing bad happens. I'm not like that. Are you like that? You don't take the black tape and cover over the thing in the car. No. What you need to do is reach out at coloradowound.com, coloradowound.com to Wound Care Associates of Colorado because they will improve healing outcomes. They'll make sure that dirt, germs, and bacteria doesn't get in because that slow healing cut is going to heal properly. But more importantly, they do house calls. They come to your place and set up a private, personalized treatment plan just for you. You don't have to worry about transportation. Don't have to worry about taking time out of your day. All you got to do is go to coloradowound.com, coloradowound.com, and contact Wound Care Associates of Colorado. They're working with my daughter right now, and it has been a remarkable change. She had a slow healing cut that wasn't healing at all, and now that they're working with her, it has been a remarkable transformation. Don't mess around if someone in your life has a similar issue. Slow healing cut, diabetic ulcer, pressure sore, coloradowound.com, coloradowound.com, Wound Care Associates of Colorado. Back to you, Jeff.
Great text message. Wound Care is stopping the commies here in Colorado, Bill.
Yeah, I like that. That's great.
We had a great show, one for the record books. If you missed any of it, go to 710knus.com to download the podcast there. We'll be back tomorrow. More debate, always between Bill and I, and we include you. You're listening to The Jeff and Bill Show.
This is Denver's talk leader, News Talk 710 KNUS. Have a